Story 1. It started with a fold in the map, something no one but Olivia noticed. We were parked just past Big Meadows, our rented RV humming in the dusk as the cicadas began their nightly chant. The four of us had spent the afternoon at Dark Hollow Falls, eating trail mix out of plastic bags and laughing too loud in a place that deserved reverence. Now the sky was starting to darken, the blue draining slowly into black behind the trees. We were supposed to stay put. Camp 49. Officially marked. Safe. But that crease in the map, it changed everything. Olivia had this thing about old places. The more forgotten, the better. She'd spent the last 2 summers urban exploring out west, abandoned malls, decommissioned missile silos, a forgotten zoo in Arizona. So when she saw the faded ink that marked an unlisted site deep in Shenandoah, just beyond a stretch of switchback trails that looped off the main park, her eyes lit up like we'd just struck gold. "Look," she said, holding the creased paper against the light. "There used to be a campground here. It's not on any of the new park signage, but it's on this older map." I squinted at it. Probably closed down. Could have been erosion. Bad bears. Lightning strikes. "That's what makes it interesting," she said and grinned. There were 4 of us on that trip. Me, David, 31, an overly cautious school counselor who never felt completely at ease in the wilderness. Olivia, 29, wild-eyed and defiant, a graphic designer by day and amateur ghost hunter by night. Theo, my younger brother, 26, fresh out of a bad breakup and hoping the mountains would fix his brain. And Hannah, 27's, Theo's best friend from college, soft-spoken and always watching the trees like they were whispering things only she could hear. We debated it for a while. Theo was immediately in. He needed a distraction, anything to get him out of his own head. Hannah just shrugged and said, "I don't think it'll be on fire," which for her was practically a scream of excitement. I was the only one who hesitated. "There's no record of it on the current site list," I said. "It could be dangerous. Abandoned means unmaintained. No rangers, no facilities, no way to get help if something happens." But that was exactly the point. We were all tired of structured, pre-packaged experiences. And Olivia had this way of making you feel like saying no meant missing out on the best part of your life. So I agreed. Stupidly, reluctantly, completely. We packed up camp just as the sky went full indigo. The path Olivia found was more overgrown than I expected. Roots poking up like ribs under skin, thick brambles snatching at our ankles. The RV couldn't make it that far, so we left it near the pull-off, locked it tight, and set off on foot with 2 tents, 4 flashlights, and a burner phone just in case. Olivia led the way, that cursed map crinkled in her pocket, leading us into the thick black of the woods. The silence hit first. You don't notice how much noise there is in most campgrounds until it's gone. No other campers, no generators, no dogs barking or children laughing or music playing over Bluetooth speakers. Just the sound of our boots on damp earth and the trees whispering above us like they were passing secrets between leaves. It took nearly 40 minutes to reach the site, if you could call it that. It was a clearing, oval-shaped, ringed with stones and old mossy fire pits. The wooden posts that must have once marked spots were half rotted and leaning like broken teeth. There was a shelter, too, what remained of one anyway, a roofless frame made of split timbers, half covered in vines. I didn't like it. Not just because it looked like it hadn't been touched in decades, but because of how still it was, like the place was holding its breath. "This is perfect," Olivia whispered, smiling like she'd found a buried temple. "You feel that? It's got history." "Feels like it's got mold," I muttered, but no one laughed. We set up the tents quickly, 2 small ones, paired off like usual, me and Theo, Olivia and Hannah. The fire pit took a bit more work. The old one was caved in, so we built a new ring from fallen stone and gathered what dry wood we could find. The night was cooling fast, and the air carried that damp mineral smell you only get near deep mountain soil. We lit the fire just after 8. By 9, the stars had cracked open the sky. It should have been peaceful, but I couldn't stop glancing at the tree line. It was too quiet. The animals were missing. No rustles, no cries, no owl sweeping overhead. I told myself they'd gone still because of us, but deep down, I knew better. Animals don't stay silent for long, not unless something bigger is around. Something worse. Theo noticed too. He kept shifting in his seat, not talking much. He'd been on edge all week, but this was different. At one point, he leaned toward me and whispered, "Do you feel watched?" I wanted to lie, wanted to shake it off, but my stomach had been twisted in a knot since we crossed into that forgotten clearing. "Yeah," I said, barely loud enough to hear myself. Olivia was all energy, bouncing around the fire with her phone, taking blurry photos in night mode. "You think any of the old campers disappeared?" she asked, half joking. Hannah didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on the woods. I remember this so clearly, it was the first real shift. Hannah slowly raised her arm and pointed to the far side of the clearing, just past the last broken post. "There's someone standing there," she said. Everything stopped. Even the fire seemed to dim. I followed her gaze. There was nothing. Just trees. Trunks pale in the moonlight, branches knotted like hands reaching toward us. "There's no one there," Olivia said. "You probably saw a shadow." But Hannah didn't blink, didn't lower her arm. "They're watching us," she said. "I saw their face, for just a second, but they didn't blink." Theo stood up, flashlight already in his hand. "I'll check it out." "No," I said sharply. "We stay together. If someone's out there, we don't want to split up." Olivia rolled her eyes, but something in her face cracked a little. A flicker of doubt. We all turned on our lights. The beams cut through the dark like pale swords, swinging back and forth across the tree line. Nothing moved, not a leaf, not a squirrel, not a breath, but I swear for just 1 second I caught a shape. Thin, tall, motionless, gone as soon as I tried to focus on it. We didn't talk much after that. The fire died low. Everyone crawled into their tents by 11. I lay awake for hours, every twig snap outside like a gunshot in my ears. I couldn't stop thinking about what Hannah said. I saw their face. What kind of face doesn't blink? I woke to the sound of gravel shifting. It was faint, so faint I thought I'd imagined it. But then it came again. A soft, granular scrape like a boot sliding across loose stones. The kind of sound that doesn't belong in the middle of a forest where the ground is mostly mud, moss, and fallen leaves. I held my breath, waited. The tent fabric rippled slightly as the breeze pressed in, but the air was too still for wind. Then I heard it again. A pause. Another step. Theo was asleep beside me, his breath slow and rhythmic, unaware. I reached out and gently pressed a hand to his shoulder. He stirred, but didn't wake. I didn't want to startle him. If this was an animal, or maybe one of the others stepping out to pee, it wasn't worth a panic. But deep down, I knew better. No one moves that quietly unless they're trying to. The zipper on the tent door felt like it screamed as I pulled it open. My flashlight was already in my hand, thumb resting on the button. I peeked out. Nothing. The fire pit was still glowing with faint orange coals, casting just enough light to blur the edge of the clearing. The trees were black columns in every direction. Olivia and Hannah's tent was zipped up tight. But there, just beyond the ring of stones, were footprints, fresh ones. I stepped out slowly, aiming my light toward the edge of the trees. The footprints were long and narrow, too large to be Olivia's, just too slim for Theo's. And they were barefoot, on gravel, in a forest that had dropped to 42 degrees that night. I felt a chill crackle down my spine, like ice water trickling between my shoulder blades. Whoever, or whatever, had walked past our tent wasn't wearing shoes, and they hadn't tried to hide their path. The prints went straight through the campsite, paused in the center, and then veered off into the woods, right toward where Hannah had pointed. I followed them to the edge of the trees, keeping my light low. I didn't want to alert whatever was out there, and I didn't want to scare myself with shadows I couldn't unsee. But something had changed in the clearing. The air felt wrong, too dense, like breathing through a wet rag. The trees seemed closer together than before. Not physically, maybe, but emotionally. They pressed inward, as if the forest itself was listening. I could hear my own pulse thudding in my ears, but beneath that, something else. Not movement, not voices, just vibration. A low-frequency hum that I felt more in my chest than in my ears. And then I saw it. Carved into the side of one of the trees, deep enough that bark had split around it, was a symbol. It wasn't fresh, weathered, but deliberate. A circle with a line running down the center and 3 short marks across it, almost like an eye crying downward. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew it wasn't graffiti. I stepped back from it instinctively. I wanted to run, wake everyone, get out. But something about the way the forest held its breath made me freeze. Like if I moved too fast, something would see, something that wasn't supposed to. Eventually, I backed away slowly and slipped back into the tent. I didn't sleep. Just lay there in the dark, heart hammering. The image of that symbol burned into the back of my eyes. Morning came gray and slow. No sun, just a flat light that made everything look washed out and wrong. The others were quiet over breakfast. Olivia kept staring into the woods, chewing her granola bar without speaking. Hannah looked pale, her eyes ringed with red. "You heard it too, didn't you?" I finally asked. She nodded. "I didn't open the tent, but something walked by. I felt it. It stopped right outside." Theo frowned. "You sure it wasn't a deer?" "No deer walks barefoot," I said, and tossed a stick into the fire. "There were prints, big ones, not human, not right." Olivia finally spoke. "I saw something last night, before I fell asleep, in the trees." We all turned to her. "It wasn't clear," she said, her voice thin, "but it was tall, thin, and it was just standing there, watching. I thought it was a tree until it moved." Theo rubbed his face. "Maybe it's a squatter, someone living off-grid out here." "No," Hannah whispered, "it's not someone, it's something." The silence after that felt like a verdict. We all felt it. This wasn't normal. This wasn't just a forgotten patch of forest or an abandoned campground. Something had stayed here, waited, grown cold with the trees and the moss and the dirt, and now it had noticed us. We agreed to leave, right after lunch, pack up, hike back to the RV, no more detours. But something had other plans. Around 11, Olivia went to grab the map from her tent and came back pale as death. "It's gone," she said. "What do you mean?" I asked. "The map, the old one. It's not in my pack. It's not anywhere." "You probably dropped it," Theo said. "We can retrace our steps." "No," she said, her voice hardening. "I packed it myself. I zipped it into the inside pocket. I know I did." We tore the camp apart, opened every bag, checked under every rock. Nothing. Without that map, the trail back was guesswork. The woods weren't straight lines. The trail we came in on was barely a game path. One wrong turn, and we could be walking in circles for hours. Hannah sat down hard on a log, her face pale. "This place doesn't want us to leave." I didn't say anything. I didn't want to agree. But I couldn't argue. Because when I walked to the edge of the clearing and looked back down the path we came from, the trail was gone. Completely overgrown, like it had never been there at all. There's a moment, right when you realize you're truly lost, where the bottom drops out of your thoughts, like stepping onto a stair that isn't there. That sensation of gravity betraying you. My stomach turned cold, and I felt my knees wobble. The trail wasn't just difficult to follow. It was gone, swallowed by brambles and ferns like we'd never walked it at all. "No," I muttered, stepping forward. This was the way. I remember that notch in the tree. That rock. There, see that? We walked right past it. Theo stood beside me, squinting. "That tree's covered in fresh growth. It would have scraped us if we passed that close, and that moss," he touched it. "It's undisturbed." It was like nature had sealed itself back up the moment we turned our backs. We regrouped at the fire pit, though no one wanted to be close to it anymore. The clearing had begun to feel wrong in the daylight, like it had fangs. The warmth from the fire didn't reach us. The light bent in weird ways, too bright one second, too dim the next. I could feel a headache building behind my eyes, something tight and pulsing, like the woods were pressing against my skull. "We need to try another direction," Olivia said, trying to sound in control, but her voice cracked at the end. "Any direction. The road wasn't more than 1.5 miles. If we pick a straight line and stick with it, We'll hit something. Eventually. We don't know what's in those woods, I said. Not just animals, terrain, caves, cliffs. And staying here is safer? Her eyes flashed. We can't just wait even to knows we're here. She was right, but the fear was catching up to her, to all of us. You could feel it fraying the edges of logic. I felt it in myself too, a voice that whispered, "You've made a mistake you can't undo." We chose east, or what we believed was east. Theo had a compass app, but it kept fluctuating wildly. At one point, it spun a full circle 3 times in a row, then locked due north on a direction we knew wasn't north. Still, we picked a line, packed light, and moved. The forest grew thicker the deeper we went. Not just dense, but unnatural. Trees grew at crooked angles, some of them fused together at the trunks, their bark twisting like rope. The canopy seemed to darken despite the sun being high. Birds remained absent. No chatter, no wing beats. Not even squirrels or chipmunks. It was as if everything alive had been scrubbed from this part of the park. Every so often, we'd find remnants, not modern ones, old ones. A rusted canteen, half sunk in a tree trunk, a snapped leather strap, even a torn patch of fabric, green and sun-bleached, caught on a bush like it had been there for decades. People have been through here, Theo said, bending to inspect the strap. Maybe even campers like us. I crouched beside him, and none of them made it back. We kept walking, 20 minutes, 30, an hour, but every step felt like looping back on ourselves. Finally, Olivia stopped and looked around. "We've passed that tree 3 times, she said. "No," I said, shaking my head. "It just looks like..." But then I saw it. The same carving, the same circle with the line and the 3 crying marks, same gash through the bark, a perfect replica of the one near our campsite, except we hadn't passed it 3 times. We hadn't left the clearing at all. It had moved. Hannah fell to her knees. She didn't cry, didn't scream. She just went still like a puppet with its strings cut. "It's the ground," she said quietly. "The forest isn't letting us leave." She ran her hands through the soil, fast, frantic. "It's not just the trees, it's everything. The land doesn't want us to go." We stood in a daze for a while. No one spoke. The wind started again, though it was cold now, sharp and needling. Then the smell hit, rot, like a wet cellar full of dead leaves and something sour, meaty. The smell seemed to seep up from the earth itself, thick and invisible. Theo stumbled back from the edge of the clearing, gagging. "What the hell is that?" We followed the scent to a pile of stones near the tree line, old, half covered in moss. I didn't want to look. Every inch of me screamed, "Don't touch it." But Olivia knelt and began pulling the stones away. There was something underneath. A bundle, wrapped in dark canvas, faded and torn at the edges. She peeled it open slowly, carefully. Her hands were shaking. Inside was a journal, moldy, fragile, bound in cracked leather. And under that, bones. Not animal. Small. Human. Olivia let out a sharp, choked breath and scrambled back, wiping her hands on her jeans like the contact had poisoned her. "Who buries something like this in the middle of a campground?" she hissed. I flipped through the journal. Most of it was illegible, water-stained and smeared, but a few phrases stood out in jagged, fading ink. "It's not the animals, it's not the cold. They watch from the trees, but they don't blink, not once. You think it's ground, but it's not. It moves, it rearranges itself. And finally, we stayed too long. They want us to join them." I didn't say anything, just closed the book, my hands cold and damp with sweat. Theo stood above us, pale and shaking. "We have to burn it." All of it. The bones, the journal, everything. But Hannah shook her head violently. "No, that's what they want. Don't disturb the dead. Don't make it worse." "Worse?" Theo snapped. "We're stuck in a forest that moves. Something watches us all night. There are bodies buried beneath us, and you're worried about respect?" "I'm worried about survival," she said. "You burn the wrong thing in a place like this, it might burn you back." A low moan passed through the trees. Not wind. Not animal. A human sound, stretched and distant. It echoed as if the forest itself had lungs, and the temperature dropped, sharp, sudden, like winter had fallen in a single breath. We ran. No one said it. No plan, no agreement, just instinct, pure and burning. The sound that came through the trees wasn't natural. It had depth, layers like it was made by a throat that wasn't shaped like ours. A human sound, twisted, like it had forgotten how to be human. I didn't know what direction we were going anymore. I didn't care. Every nerve in my body screamed, move. I grabbed Hannah's hand without thinking. Olivia had already bolted ahead, crashing through brush. Theo followed behind, flashlight jerking wildly, his breath ragged and fast. We tore through the forest like animals. The branches clawed at our arms, whipped against our faces, snagged on our clothes. Thorns bit into our legs. We didn't stop, couldn't stop. That sound was still behind us, even though I couldn't say how close. It wasn't getting louder, but it wasn't going away either. It just followed. A sound like grief turned inside out. We reached another clearing, smaller, darker, now ringed in boulders the size of trucks. No fire pit, no signs of human life. Just a twisted oak in the center, half-deaf, dead, branches curled like ribs around a black, gaping hollow. We stopped to catch our breath, and for a moment, everything went still. Then the forest moaned again. Closer. Theo turned in a circle, flashlight beam slicing across trunks. We have to keep moving. No, Olivia gasped. If we keep running, we'll separate. We'll get lost. We're already lost. I grabbed Theo's arm. We need light. Real light. Fire if we can't get back to the RV. It hates light. Whatever it is, it waits until dark. Olivia dropped her pack and started digging through it. I have road flares. Just a couple. She handed them out. I cracked mine, and the red glare bled across the trees like a wound. Theo held his out in front of him like a torch, the flame sputtering slightly in the damp air. We stood in a square, backs to one another, staring into the woods. Waiting, but nothing came. No movement, no sound, just the cold pressing and tighter, denser, like we were sinking into it. I started to notice something strange. The trees beyond the edge of the flare light looked off. Not just dark, wrong. They bent too far inward. Their bark looked stretched, almost pulsing, and in the shadows between them, shapes shifted. They're watching, Hannah said softly. I don't think they can come into the light. What are they? Theo whispered. I don't think they are, she answered. Silence again, then a voice. It didn't echo, it didn't come from any direction. It just was. I can't blink, it said. All four of us froze. I see you, it continued. You're inside now, you don't get out. It was my voice, my exact voice. I staggered back from the tree line, heart hammering so hard it felt like it would tear through my chest. What the hell was that? Sound mimicking, Olivia said, voice shaking. Birds do it, some animals, but that wasn't a mimic, Hannah said. That was a warning. Something moved at the edge of the trees. We all turned. A face, no more than 20 feet from us. Pale, hollow-eyed, lips that didn't quite form words, just parted into a too-wide grin, and it didn't blink. I raised the flare. The light touched it, and it vanished, not ran, not moved, just gone, like the light erased it. We spent the rest of the night in that clearing, four of us, back to back, watching the trees for movement. We lit a small fire eventually, fed it slowly with broken branches and flare casings and anything dry we could find. The moaning came and went, sometimes close, sometimes farther, but they never entered the circle of firelight. And the worst part, I started seeing other flares, brief, red glows deeper in the woods. Then gone, again, then gone. Others, lost like us, maybe not alive anymore, maybe never were. By dawn, we were hollow, our faces drawn, our skin damp with cold sweat. Theo's lips were blue. Olivia's hands wouldn't stop shaking. Hannah hadn't spoken since the voice. But then something changed. The light came differently, brighter, warmer, and through a break in the trees, I saw it. A trail. Real. Marked. Packed dirt. I didn't question it. I just grabbed Hannah's hand again and started walking. The others followed. None of us spoke. We were too scared it would vanish again if we acknowledged it. It didn't. For the first time in what felt like days, the forest didn't fight us. It parted. And an hour later, we reached the RV, just sitting there, as if it had never left. Dusty, cold, undisturbed. We climbed inside like survivors crawling into a lifeboat, locked the doors, sat in silence. Only then did I notice something strange on the windshield, a smear, 3 vertical lines running downward like tears. I reached out, touched it. The smear was on the inside. The drive out of Shenandoah felt like waking up from anesthesia, slow, groggy, and unnatural. The roads were the same winding paths we'd driven a dozen times before, but they didn't feel familiar. The trees still leaned in close, their tops arched like old cathedral ceilings, filtering the morning sun into long beams that cut through the fog. But even as we descended out of the hills and back toward human civilization, none of us spoke. There's something about surviving something unexplainable that makes silence feel safer than words. I remember glancing in the rearview mirror again and again, expecting to see something, someone sitting in the road behind us, watching, not moving, not blinking, but the road stayed empty. We made it to a gas station near Luray just before noon, a real place. People. Warm food smells and car tires on pavement, but the cashier looked at us like we were ghosts. Maybe it was the mud, or the stench of cold smoke clinging to our clothes, or maybe we just had the look of people who had seen something they shouldn't. We washed up in the restrooms, got coffee. Theo bought a burner phone and called our parents, told them we'd lost signal for a couple days, that everything was fine now. Olivia said she wanted to get back to DC that night. Hannah didn't say anything at all. I was the last one back in the RV. I stood beside the pumps for a long time, just staring at the mountains in the distance. They were beautiful, deep green, rolling, gentle in the way only old mountains can be. You'd never know what lived inside them, what watched from the old clearings, what waited in places long removed from maps. Back on the road, the silence finally broke. "You saw the flares too, didn't you?" Olivia asked quietly from the passenger seat. I nodded. Theo turned from the small table in back. "They weren't ours. They weren't alive." "No," I agreed, "but they used to be." Hannah finally looked up from the floor. That place, it pulls people in. It wants them to stay, not just physically, emotionally, spiritually. "I felt it," I said, "like a pressure, like we were being invited to vanish." None of us argued. By the time we reached the edge of town, the sun had risen enough to warm the windows. I remember thinking it should have felt like safety, but it didn't. Not really. The cold from that place lingered in my chest like smoke after a fire. We dropped Olivia off first, then Hannah. Each goodbye felt like leaving a piece of ourselves behind. By the time I pulled up in front of Theo's place, he hesitated with his hand on the door. "You think it's over?" he asked. "No," I said honestly, "but we're out. That's what matters." He nodded, but I could see he didn't believe it. Neither did I. I parked the RV in a storage lot the next day. I told myself I'd go back in a week to clean it out properly, maybe list it for sale. But I didn't. I couldn't. Something about stepping inside that vehicle again made my stomach turn. Then the dreams started. At first they were vague. Trees, darkness. That voice, my voice saying, "You're inside now." Then came the clearer ones. I'd wake up in the driver's seat, parked back at that clearing, fire cold, flares burned out, the others gone, just me and the forest around me. I thought maybe I was losing it, so I called Olivia. She answered on the first ring. "I hear it too," she said before I could even speak. "In my sleep, in my apartment, sometimes in mirrors." That night, I pulled the old journal from the sealed bin I'd locked it in. I hadn't looked at it since we left. I'd almost convinced myself I imagined the writing, but there were new pages. Blank before, now covered in the same jagged handwriting. New entries, dated after we left. The clearing changes. You think you left, but you didn't. You never really leave. It follows you home. It remembers your name. And finally, I can't blink. I see you. I slammed it shut and burned the damn thing. Every page, every binding. I watched it curl and blacken in the sink, flames licking the porcelain like tongues. I thought that would be the end. But this morning, I woke up to find 3 vertical smears on the inside of my bathroom mirror. Tear-shaped, running downward, like someone had been watching me sleep. I didn't leave the apartment that day. Couldn't. Every step I took away from the mirror felt like stepping farther into a trap I didn't understand. I kept expecting to hear something behind me. a shift in the air, the floor creaking under weight that wasn't mine. But it never came. What came was the silence, not peace, not quiet, the kind of silence that feels dense, that crawls inside your ears and hums, the same kind that filled the abandoned campground. That same vacuum of normal sound, no birds outside, no wind through the trees, just the apartment, still and listening. I taped the mirror, covered it with a towel, then duct taped over that. I turned every reflective surface in the place around, the TV, my phone, the stainless steel kettle, anything that could show a face. I couldn't explain it. It felt insane. But I kept remembering that voice. My voice, the way it echoed without direction, the way it knew. And the thing that chilled me the most, the fact that the voice in the forest hadn't been trying to trick us. It had been inviting us. I stayed awake the entire night, lights on, every flashlight in my emergency kit on the coffee table, flare gun from the RV right beside me, even though I knew it was stupid. What was I going to do? Shoot at a ghost? At the memory of a shape that didn't blink? Around 3:17 a.m., the power went out. I was sitting on the couch, eyes open, nerves frayed, and then everything died at once, the fridge, the lamps, the hum of electronics. My apartment became a cave, a black box. For 5 long seconds, I sat in total darkness. Then I heard breathing, not mine, not steady. It was shallow, ragged, right behind me. I turned with my flashlight and found nothing. But when I turned back toward the window, something was reflected there, just for a moment, in the glass. My face, staring back at me, smiling, not blinking. I dropped the flashlight and scrambled backward, knocking over a chair, nearly breaking my wrist on the coffee table. The beam spun across the room and hit the towel-covered mirror, and I saw 3 long, wet streaks running down the inside of the fabric. I left that apartment the next day. Didn't tell anyone. Didn't wait for answers. Packed a bag, locked the door, and drove until the sky changed colors. Slept in the RV on a back lot in Tennessee for 3 nights, then rented a place under a fake name 3 towns away. It didn't follow, not exactly. But the air still felt wrong sometimes. I could still feel it watching, waiting, testing the edges of wherever I went. I wasn't the only one running. Theo stopped answering his phone 2 weeks later. His roommate said he'd moved out in the middle of the night, left his phone, his job, his dog, just disappeared. Olivia booked a one-way ticket to Alaska, said she needed wide spaces, said she wanted to be somewhere too cold for them to come looking. I asked her what she meant. She just said, places like that don't let go, they extend. And Hannah? She's still the only one who never tried to leave. She went back. I found out a month later, saw her face on a missing persons flyer online, last seen near Shenandoah's northern boundary, backpacking solo. I knew what happened. We all did. That place called to her. It wanted her back. And she answered. Sometimes I wonder if that's what it was doing to us the entire time, testing us, seeing who would break, who would run, who would return, and who would join it. It wasn't just a haunted place, not just some abandoned campground forgotten by rangers and erased from maps. It was something older than that, something hungry, something alive in ways we can't understand, a place that wears the skin of a forest but holds the mind of a predator. It lets people in, and it waits for years, maybe decades, until someone forgets to follow the rules, until someone lets curiosity overpower instinct, until someone decides to stay, and then it closes the path behind them. But the worst part, the reason I still sleep with a flashlight under my pillow and check every mirror twice before brushing my teeth, isn't that it traps people. It's that it follows the ones who escape. Not to kill, not to scare, but to whisper, to remind us. We never really left. We just brought it with us. Story 2. I never really bought into the whole spiritual power of the Grand Canyon thing. Not that I was cynical about nature. I've always loved camping, but I liked facts, maps, and weather reports. My wife, Erin, was more the mystic. She'd read about thin places where the veil between worlds wears down. She used to say places like the canyon don't just echo sound. They echo memory, emotion, intention. But I didn't marry her because I believed her. I married her because when she talked about those things, she made them feel real. We'd been living out of our Sprinter van for 6 months by then, traveling west from Missouri with no particular schedule. Just two former teachers who cashed out early, tired of loud bells and quiet paychecks. The plan was to hit every national park in the Southwest before it got too hot. Then maybe Oregon, maybe upstate Idaho. The Grand Canyon was our midpoint. We rolled in through the east entrance just after noon on a Tuesday. We'd already done a couple of nights at busy campgrounds near Sedona, so Aaron wanted to boondock somewhere quieter. I found a spot on a forest road about 20 minutes south of Desert View. No hookups, no toilets, no neighbors in sight. The air was cool for May, maybe 65. Sunlight filtered through tall ponderosa pines, and just a short hike west, the rim opened up to the kind of view people drive 2,000 miles to see. We parked in a clearing barely wide enough to back in without scraping a tree. The van doors opened onto a soft bed of needles and red dirt. The silence was complete. Erin stepped out, took a deep breath, and smiled like she'd found the center of the world. I remember how still she stood. No phone in hand, no camera, just her eyes tracking a hawk that circled above the trees. "This place feels older than time," she said. I laughed. "And older than cell service, too. We've got maybe one bar." She tilted her head. "Good." I didn't disagree. We hiked out to the rim before dinner, navigating a narrow trail that ended in a wide, flat ledge overlooking the canyon. It was breathtaking, not just for the view, but for the drop. No guardrails, no tourists, just wind and a sheer fall into blood-orange rock. The canyon was quieter than I expected. Not silent, exactly. The wind moved like breath, and once I swore I heard a raven cry echo 5 or 6 different ways. Erin sat on the edge, legs crossed, her palms flat on the rock like she was grounding herself. I stayed a few feet back. Heights never bothered me until I turned 40. Now they had a way of reminding me how easily things fall. As the sun set, the rocks turned purple, then gray. That night we made chili and watched the stars from inside the van. Erin fell asleep fast, tucked into the corner with a paperback folded on her chest. I stayed up a while, listening. There were no crickets, no frogs, just the creaking groan of the van as it settled and the occasional sigh of wind through the trees. At some point I heard something else. It sounded like a voice. Not a word. More like a thread of breath that almost carried a word. Like someone trying to speak from far away but not quite reaching the air. It came from outside, low and thin, and lasted no more than 3 seconds. I sat up and waited. Nothing. I turned off the fan. Still nothing. Eventually I laid back down, chalked it up to the wind, or maybe the pine pitch heating on the van roof. But I didn't sleep easy. The next day we hiked the rim again. Erin brought her sketch pad, and I wandered up and down the path, snapping photos of striations in the rock. Around lunchtime, I saw something strange. Farther down the trail, maybe a mile from our ledge, I spotted a small cairn, a stack of flat stones about a foot tall, placed deliberately just off the path. People build them all the time in national parks, even though they're technically discouraged. But this one had something wedged between the top 2 stones. I stepped off the trail and took a closer look. It was a strip of red fabric, sun-faded and frayed at one end, like the sleeve of a child's shirt. I left it alone. That night, the wind picked up. It rattled the van in its frame. I could hear pine cones rolling across the roof like dry bones. Erin was out cold again. I envied her. At some point, maybe around 1 a.m, I heard the whisper again. This time it was clearer. Still not a word, but definitely a voice. Soft, genderless. Right on the edge of meaning. It came from the direction of the canyon. I got out of bed, walked to the back of the van, and slid open the rear door. The cold hit me first, sharper than before. The whisper came again. It didn't echo. It was as if the canyon had swallowed the sound and spit it back with no direction, no depth, like the air itself was trying to speak. I stood barefoot in the dirt, holding the edge of the van door like it was a tether to reality. There was no moon. The pines swayed, their needles hissing like distant applause. I couldn't explain it, but I felt seen. Not watched, not hunted, just observed. Like something down there had noticed us. Noticed me. I went back inside and locked the doors. The next morning, I didn't mention the sound. Erin seemed so happy. She made coffee on the camp stove and sang under her breath as she cleaned out the mugs. I didn't want to break that feeling. But when we hiked back to the ledge, she stopped short before we got there. "What's that smell?" she asked. I didn't smell anything at first. Then I did. It was faint, metallic, sour, and strangely warm. I said maybe it was an animal carcass nearby. She didn't answer, just moved toward the edge and looked down. The scent was gone by the time I reached her. We didn't see anything. That afternoon, I tried to make sense of it. The voice, the smell, the way the pine shadows seemed longer than they should be, even at noon. I told myself it was just the altitude messing with my senses, or maybe a gas pocket down in the canyon doing weird things to sound. But that night, Erin whispered something in her sleep. I leaned close. She said, "They're calling." Then she smiled. I didn't wake her. I sat there in the dark, back against the kitchenette cabinet, knees pulled up, listening to her breathe. Calling. The word repeated in my head like a song lyric you can't place. That wasn't a word Erin used often. When she dreamed, it was usually about rivers, birds, her childhood dog, soft things. But this smile she wore, it wasn't peaceful. It was blank, like a mask someone had drawn onto her sleeping face. I stayed awake until dawn. When the sun finally pushed through the pines, I stepped outside and took a deep breath. The air had that dry, dusty cleanness to it, like the world had been reset. I watched the light move across the canyon floor, slow and deliberate. The colors shifted with it, deep ochre to burnt sienna to something almost purple. Then I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Tiny lines carved into the stone near the rim. Not recent, shallow, weathered, and uneven. They looked like tally marks, 5 lines, then a space, 5 more. I crouched down and ran my finger across them. The rock was rough, sun-warmed, but the grooves were just deep enough to feel. There were 3 groups of tallies, 15 marks. I didn't tell Erin. We spent the morning in silence, not because we were fighting, but because it felt like the kind of day where words would just evaporate. I started the van's engine, thinking maybe we'd move on. Head toward Lake Powell or swing back toward Flagstaff. But Erin said she wasn't ready. "There's something unfinished here," she told me. Her voice was quiet, not sad, but far away. That night, the wind was dead still. No creaks, no rattling, no pine cones on the roof. It should have been calming, but it wasn't. The stillness pressed on the van like pressure, like a vacuum. And that's when the voices returned. Not one this time, several. Faint, overlapping whispers, like a group prayer spoken too far away to understand. They didn't come from a single direction. They rose up from the canyon itself, as if the stone walls were vibrating with memory. I sat bolt upright in bed. Erin was already awake, sitting cross-legged in front of the back doors. She didn't look at me, just stared into the seam between the doors, the thin sliver of moonlight that cut through it like a blade. She whispered, "Do you hear them now?" I couldn't answer, because I did. They weren't speaking English or anything I recognized, but there was emotion in it, grief, longing, something ancient and urgent, like a warning wrapped in a lullaby. Erin reached for the latch. I crossed the van in 2 steps and caught her wrist. She looked at me, not startled, not afraid, just calm. "They're waiting," she said. I shook my head. "We're leaving," I told her, "at first light." She didn't argue, but she didn't agree either. That night, I didn't sleep at all. At some point, maybe around 3 a.m., I saw movement outside, just a flicker. I crawled into the driver's seat and peered through the windshield. There, near the edge of the trees, stood a figure. Not close, not detailed, just a silhouette, tall, narrow, unmoving. I blinked, looked again, gone. I waited until sunrise before stepping outside. I checked the dirt near the trees. No prints, no sign of an animal, nothing. I started packing. I told Erin to get ready, but she didn't respond. She was sitting in the same spot as before, now staring down at her hands. She held something in them. It was a necklace, thin, delicate, with a charm shaped like a feather, not hers. I asked where She got it. She didn't look up. It was on the cairn, she said. What cairn? I asked, already knowing the answer. She looked at me then, and her face, God, her face, she looked like someone who just remembered something awful. It wasn't just a cairn, she whispered. It was a marker. I felt it in my chest then, this terrible, slow realization crawling up my spine. I remembered the marks near the canyon edge. 3 sets of tallies, 15 lines, 15 nights, 15 people. I don't know. I just know that the air felt heavier than ever, like the canyon itself had shifted, like we had stayed too long. I told her we were leaving now. She didn't argue. We didn't speak as I backed the van out of the clearing and eased it onto the gravel road. But as the trees thinned and the canyon faded behind us, Erin turned in her seat and looked out the rear window. She pressed her palm to the glass, and she whispered, almost too softly to hear, "I'm sorry." I didn't hear the apology, but I felt every tremor of it in the way she pressed into the seat. The engine rattled over gravel as we drove, and I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, expecting that silhouette to appear behind us. But nothing changed. The canyon cliffs were gone. By the time we reached paved road and real cell service, Erin was quiet. Even her breath felt calculated. I parked at a rest stop overlooking open high desert, told her I'd get coffee. Inside, the urn was empty. I watched the old machine gurgle as it tried to self-clean. Impatient, I poured hot water into a cup, blending grounds with bubbling steam. I brought 2 cups to the picnic table. She took one without looking up. I slid into the bench across from her and handed it over. We sat in silence, coffee cooling between us, nerves taut as bowstrings. Finally, she spoke. "That charm," she said. "The feather. It's Paiute, or Hopi maybe, a symbol for spirit flight." I nodded slowly, thinking about the whispering voices, the tallies, the cairn. So someone marked that spot. Someone kept tally of something. Her fingers tightened around the cup. Years ago, there was a story. A group of people went missing along that road. Didn't get any media attention. They were searching for so-called spiritual sites. Some said they just vanished into the canyon, right around where we camped. I looked up. When? Fall 2097. 15 of them, 5 couples and 1 guide. No trace, until months later the charm was found near one of their backpacks. She sounded detached, like reciting from memory, but her face said she was reliving it. 15, I whispered. She nodded. 15 tallies. Each night they camped, each day they walked toward the rim, left markers. Someone kept that charm as a reminder. I thought of the weeks we spent planning, of the thrill of isolation, of my wife smiling into the void at midnight, touched by voices. I didn't want to believe it, she said, but those voices, they sounded like them, like people pleading for help, still trying to get out. A hot ache rose in my chest. We'd come here for beauty, for escape, and redrawn history we didn't belong to. I stood. The cup tumbled into the gravel, shattered. Erin watched, tears forming. I didn't reach for her. We drove the rest of the day without speaking. Route 64 toward Williams, then I-40. Sunset burned low behind us. Yellow desert shrank into sage. A long ridge shadowed the road. That night, we found a crowded motel near Seligman, one of those motels with neon lobster signs and candy-striped awnings. I booked a room with 2 beds. I slept on the floor. Erin didn't sleep at all. By sunrise, we were back in the van, pointed east toward Texas. We stopped only for fuel, water, trail mix. Each time I checked behind us, no whispers, no shadows. A week after we left, I was sorting laundry at a laundromat in Amarillo when Erin came in behind me. She had that same distant look, as if living 2 lives at once. "Help me," she said. "I'm still hearing them." They were faint now, barely whispers, echoes of layered sobs and murmured names. She pressed her hand to her temple. I took it, pressing back. "We'll go somewhere they can't follow," I said. "Somewhere flat, noisy, somewhere normal." She nodded. We left Texas. Drove to the Gulf, parked by the ocean. Salt air ripping through the windows. We slept under the roar of waves. The voices still came, but quieter, like an old radio tuned-off station. For a month we stayed. I worked odd jobs, gardening, shifting pallets at a warehouse. Erin painted minimalist abstracts, blues and grays and wavering verticals. Each day she woke without saying the word sorry again. But at night, even as the surf masked the voices, her dreams turned. She'd toss and murmur, names, maybe theirs, 3 men, 5 women, 7 names I never caught. One night I asked her, "Are you okay?" She looked at me. Her eyes were empty but fierce. "They're not asking anymore," she said. "They're warning." I wanted to ask what they were warning against, but I didn't. Fear had toasted that part of my tongue. Her paintings began to change, darker, vertical streaks fragmented by splashes of red ochre like crackling fires in canyon walls. I stood in front of them, dizzy. "This isn't about the canyon anymore," I said. She didn't answer. Just stared at the largest canvas, a 4-foot panel streaked with black, gray, and blood. Whisper-thin lines etched into the paint. I traced one. I could almost feel grooves. "Don't overthink it," she said, watching me. I stepped back. Her face was composed, but the shadows under her eyes had turned permanent. Months passed. We moved again. Mountains, plains, forest. But memories lingered, like strands of canyon dust in our lungs. Then last week, I woke to the taste of red dirt in the air. Erin was standing by the window, silent. On the desk in front of her was a photo of the ribbon charm. And below it, over and over, 15 tally marks in permanent marker on a scrap of vellum. She turned toward me. "They're done," she whispered. "They've helped me finish." I didn't ask how. I don't want to know. But today she mailed everything to a museum. I don't know which one, and I don't want to. Just promised it would be sealed. Archived, out of reach. We're camping again tonight in a state park somewhere east along a lake. The woods are still, the water softens the hush of insects. I can't hear them, but Erin, curled up with her painting pad, smiles, and I believe. I believe some places hold voices that can't be buried. I believe memory bleeds through stone, through space, through living hearts. I believe that as long as we remember, they're never truly gone. It was the first night I truly slept. Deep sleep. Not just the absence of nightmares, but that rare kind where the weight behind your eyes dissolves and your body feels like it's floating. I don't remember dreaming or moving, just darkness, soft and forgiving. When I woke, the air smelled of pine needles and lake water. I sat up slowly, surprised at how light my limbs felt. Erin was outside, already moving quietly between the van and the picnic table, her breath visible in the cool morning air. She looked better, not healed, not yet, but present. Her hands weren't shaking. I stepped out barefoot and winced as the gravel poked into my soles. The forest stretched low and thick around us, the trees softer than the pines up north. The lake sat maybe 20 yards away, flat and dark, reflecting the sky like a pressed mirror. I stood beside her in the quiet, holding a chipped enamel mug. She handed me the coffee she'd already poured. "Did you sleep?" I asked. She nodded. "They're gone." I watched her face. Her eyes didn't flinch. There was no hesitation in her answer. I believed her. But something inside me, something didn't feel finished. Later that morning, we walked a trail around the lake. A loop, about 3 miles. Easy terrain, mostly flat. No cliffs, no ledges. The trees were thinner here, the understory dense with low shrubs and the kind of silence that feels healthy, natural. Still, I kept glancing over my shoulder. Old habits. We passed a man walking his dog, a father and daughter on bikes. No one looked twice at us. No one lingered. It felt like the opposite of the canyon. No hum beneath the soil, no strange pull on the skin, just ordinary woods. We stopped halfway around where a fallen tree jutted into the lake like a natural dock. Erin sat with her feet dangling just above the water. I stood beside her, not saying anything. After a long time, she said, "You remember that last night?" I didn't need her to explain. "The night we left?" I asked. She nodded. "The last thing I heard, it wasn't words. Not exactly. More like a feeling." "What feeling?" "Regret." Her voice trembled slightly, just once. "But not mine. Theirs." The wind picked up, and a small wave lapped against the bank. "I think they didn't mean to call us. Not really. I think they were trying to be remembered, and we happened to be listening." The idea unsettled me more than I wanted to admit. What did they regret? She didn't answer right away. She bent down and dipped her fingers into the water. Her reflection rippled out and broke apart. "Not leaving sooner," she said. I didn't ask what she meant, if it was about them or about us. I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Maybe both. That afternoon we packed up, not in a rush. Just methodically, like people who knew they were moving on. We drove without GPS, back roads, just followed signs east until we hit a 2-lane highway. It was early evening by then, and I was growing tired, eyelids heavy behind my sunglasses. "Let's find somewhere to stop soon," I said. Erin was quiet, watching the horizon. Then she pointed. "Turn there." It was an unmarked road, paved but narrow and worn, with tufts of grass growing between the wheel grooves. We followed it about half a mile before it opened up into a clearing. A pond sat just beyond it, ringed with cattails, no signs, no fire pits, no designated campsites. But it looked flat and quiet, and I was too tired to argue. We parked beneath a birch tree. That night, the air was warm, too warm for early spring. The van's windows were cracked, and frogs croaked in the reeds beyond the pond. I laid on my back in the dark, counting each sound. Crickets, wind, the occasional thump of a branch falling nearby, and then something shifted. Not loud, not sudden, just that subtle pull, a pressure change, like the breath before a thunderclap, or the silence in a church when the doors close behind you. I sat up. Erin was already awake. She was staring at the back wall of the van where our jackets hung. Nothing was moving. Nothing was wrong. But she whispered, "It's not them." A chill crept across my arms. "What?" Her voice was flat, certain. "It's not the canyon voices. This is something else." I strained to listen, but I didn't hear anything different. Still, the silence felt wrong. Too absolute, like the world had stopped adjusting its weight. I reached for the flashlight. She grabbed my wrist. "Don't." I froze. Her eyes were wide now, her breath shallow. "They don't like light," she said. I don't know how she knew. Maybe the same way she'd known when to leave. Maybe she didn't know. Maybe it was fear, but I obeyed. We sat there, locked in place, two shadows inside a metal shell, listening to the nothing, and slowly, that nothing turned into something. Not noise exactly, but presence. Like a shape you can't see pressing against your periphery, like a smell without a source. I could feel it behind the van, not moving, not threatening, just there. And worse, expecting. I whispered, "What do they want?" Erin's voice cracked. "Not us." And then I understood, or thought I did. Whatever this was, it wasn't calling, it was waiting. Watching who would dare speak first, and we weren't going to. We stayed still until dawn. When the sun finally cracked over the trees, the air snapped back into normal. Birds returned, crickets chirped, a fish jumped in the pond like nothing had ever been wrong. But we didn't speak. Not as we packed, not as we drove, not until we hit asphalt again. Then Erin turned to me, her voice hoarse. "Some places are echoes. Others are mouths." I looked straight ahead. My hands tightened on the wheel. And I started to wonder how many places like that we'd passed without noticing, and how many were still waiting to be heard. We didn't camp again for a while, not because we gave up on the road or the wild, but because something changed in the way we looked at silence. That kind of change doesn't fade. It reshapes how you move, how you rest, how you trust the ground beneath your feet. We started staying at small motels more often, cheap ones with humming ice machines and fluorescent signs, somewhere with people a wall away, somewhere noise existed. Not the good kind, but the kind that kept the night ordinary, the kind that reminded you other lives were still running parallel to yours. We didn't talk about that last night. The not canyon thing. Not directly. It sat between us like a third passenger, silent and alert. A new rule, unspoken but permanent. Some places are echoes, others are mouths. I repeated it in my head sometimes like a riddle. I didn't fully understand it. Not then. I wasn't sure I wanted to. We ended up in Arkansas, just outside the Ozarks, a town that didn't appear on most maps. One gas station, 2 diners, and a hardware store that sold everything from screws to goat feed. We'd planned to stay a night. Ended up staying 4. The woods there felt different. Not forgiving, exactly, but older in a quieter way. Like they didn't need to whisper. They just watched. On the third night, we walked past a field behind the motel. Tall grass swayed in the breeze, and beyond it, the tree line began, thick and black, barely touched by moonlight. Erin stopped and tilted her head, listening. I felt my breath catch, but she smiled. Nothing, she said. Real nothing. I nodded, but I didn't move closer to the trees. That night, back in our room, I sat at the small desk and opened a notebook, pages blank for weeks now. The pen felt heavier than it should have. Erin was brushing her hair in the mirror, quietly humming some old tune from her childhood. She had color in her cheeks again. I asked, "Do you think they followed us?" She didn't stop brushing, but her voice dropped just enough to make the air feel tight. "No, but they watch." She caught my eye in the mirror. "That's enough." I didn't ask who they were anymore. The canyon ones, the thing from the pond, others like them. It didn't matter. The pattern had become familiar. Places where something was left behind. Grief, memory, pain, ritual. They lingered, sometimes with voice, sometimes just in weight. Erin turned toward me, setting her brush down. "We need to decide," she said, "if we're going to keep going, if we're going to keep listening." I didn't answer right away. It wasn't about fear anymore. Not exactly. It was about thresholds. We'd crossed one in Arizona, another maybe by that pond. I wasn't sure how many more we could cross before something crossed back. Still, I missed the trees, the long hours with no schedule, the sound of wind against canvas, the smell of pine sap in the morning. "We don't have to go back," she said, reading me. "But if we do, we have to go different." What does that mean? It means we don't ignore anymore. If we go to these places, we honor them. Even if they're dangerous, especially then. She walked toward the bed, pulled the covers back, and slid under. I stared at my notebook for a long time before writing one sentence. "They're not waiting to hurt you. They're waiting to be remembered." The next morning, we left early. Didn't know where we were headed yet, just east or maybe south. Away from mountains, away from mouths, but not forever. We drove in silence for the first hour until the road cut through a low valley of fog. Sunlight bled across it, turning the mist gold and white. And that's when we saw it. A trailhead sign. Weathered wood, split at one corner, no cars in the lot, just one narrow dirt path weaving into the fog, a place we didn't plan for. Erin looked at me and smiled. "Just a walk," she said. I parked the van, and we stepped out together. The path was soft beneath our boots, layers of pine needles and rotting leaves muffling our steps. The fog rolled like breath around our ankles, and the deeper we went, the more it seemed to thicken. Not with darkness, but with quiet. Not the bad kind, not the canyon kind. This silence felt clean, like the forest was holding its breath in reverence, not dread. We walked single file, Erin leading, me half a step behind, eyes flicking between her back and the pale outlines of trees ahead. I could barely see 20 feet in any direction. Sound disappeared into the mist like it never existed. No birds, no insects, just the sound of our boots pressing down what had already been pressed down 1,000 times before. After maybe a mile, the trail curved left and opened into a small clearing, no bigger than a living room. A low stone wall ringed its edge, moss-covered and collapsed in places, half swallowed by time. The kind of ruin you'd never find on a map. The kind someone forgot to remember. Erin stepped to the center and stopped. She stood there, perfectly still, her arms loose at her sides. I came up behind her, and I swear I could feel something settle, not land, not fall, just ease into place, like an invisible body finally sitting down after a long, hard walk. "I've seen this," she said quietly, "in dreams." My skin prickled. "Here?" She nodded. "Not exactly, but close. Something like it." I stepped closer to the wall, ran my fingers along the stone. It was damp, cool, the moss thick like velvet. Beneath the green, the stone was red. Canyon red. I don't know why that scared me so much. Maybe because it reminded me how far things can follow you, how some pieces of one place can hide in another, or maybe because it made me wonder if that ancient thing in the canyon didn't start there. Maybe it just stayed there the longest. Erin knelt suddenly and began brushing leaves aside with her hands. I crouched down. "What are you doing?" "There's something underneath." she whispered. I hesitated, then joined her. The leaves peeled away easily. Underneath was hard-packed soil, crisscrossed with thin roots, and carved into the dirt, barely visible, were shallow marks. Angular, not natural. Man-made. I leaned closer, a ring of symbols. Not letters, not words, more like a pattern. Interconnected loops and slashes. Like someone had tried to draw sound. Erin traced one with her fingertip. They weren't forgotten, she said. They were buried. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out, because suddenly I could hear something. Not voices, not whispers. Breathing. All around us, a deep, slow, rhythmic inhale, then pause, then exhale. It didn't move the trees, it didn't disturb the fog, but it was there, not threatening, not angry, witnessing. I stood slowly and backed toward the trail. Erin remained kneeling. Come on, I whispered. Let's go. She looked up and I saw tears on her cheeks. Why do we run every time something sees us? She asked. Because some things shouldn't see us, I said. Because some things are waiting for us to ask the wrong question. Her hands curled into fists. But what if they're just waiting for us to ask anything at all? A tremor ran through the earth. Not like an earthquake. More like movement. Underneath. Not a threat. Not a promise. Just motion. Like something very, very large had just turned over in its sleep. I felt it pass through my spine. My stomach clenched. We should go, I said, firmer this time. Erin wiped her face, nodded, and stood. We walked back without speaking. The fog had begun to lift, and as we emerged from the trees, the parking lot looked different, less abandoned, like it belonged to the trail again, like it had been acknowledged. I didn't look back. Not until we were on the highway. Even then, when I glanced in the mirror, all I saw were trees. Later that night, camped at a roadside stop, Erin reached across the van and took my hand. I think we found one, she whispered. One what? She looked out the window at the darkened trees, a place that remembers us. That night, for the first time in a long while, I dreamed. Not of fear, not of cliffs or whispers. I dreamed of something old and patient and listening. Weeks passed. We kept driving, not aimlessly, not anymore, with intention. We started marking the places that felt different, places that pulled at something deep in the ribs, not always in fear, not always in peace. We called them thin spots, like Erin used to say, places where the fabric of things wore down just enough that something could pass through, memory, sound, light, breath. Not evil, not good, just aware. There was a stretch of highway in Utah where the rocks leaned toward the road at odd angles, like they were watching. We stopped there for 15 minutes and didn't say a word, just listened. There was an abandoned ranger station in New Mexico, its windows blown out and vines growing through the floor. Erin stood inside and closed her eyes and said, "This one's empty now." And I believed her. But there was one place we hadn't talked about going back to, the canyon. We drove around it, took the long way north toward Bryce, then Zion, camped in the high deserts where the winds sang softer, but that edge of Arizona pulled at us like gravity. Then one morning, Erin said, "We should go back." I looked at her for a long time. "Why?" "Because I don't think it's done," she said, so we went. It was early October, cold in the mornings, dry in that way that stung your skin. We kept to the main roads at first, South Rim, crowds, rangers, people with walking sticks and cell phones and laughter. And for a while, I thought that would be enough, just to see it again, just to stand near it without feeling pulled under. But the third night in, Erin turned to me and said, "Let's go back to the ledge." I didn't ask which one. We took the same forest road we had that spring. It looked different, drier, more brittle, like it had aged faster than it should have. The pines had that dusty, red-tinged hue. And the clearing where we'd parked, it was still there, still open, still waiting. We backed the van in slowly. I kept checking the mirrors. The sun was setting, casting long shadows between the trees like fingers reaching for something forgotten. We sat in silence for an hour, windows open, just listening. The canyon's voice had changed. The wind still spoke, but it didn't call. It didn't try to shape itself into words. It watched. That night, we didn't sleep in the van. We laid out pads and blankets near the fire pit. No tent, no roof. Stars like pinpricks in black velvet. The Milky Way a smear of frozen breath. And sometime past midnight, we heard it again. Not the voices, not the whispering. The breathing, slow, wide, like the canyon itself was alive beneath us, holding its chest still to hear what we would say. And Erin sat up, eyes wide open. "They're still there," she whispered. I sat up, heart thudding. "The ones from before?" She shook her head. "No, others, the ones watching the watchers." I didn't know what that meant. I didn't want to. But then I felt it, that same vibration under my spine, not shaking, not violent, just movement, something waking up. She stood, walked to the edge of the ledge like she had before. I got up too fast. "Don't go any closer." She didn't. She just stared down into the dark. And I swear to God, the shadows shifted, like something blinked. "I think it remembers us," she said. "Not just me, us, the canyon, the land, the place." She turned and looked at me, tears on her cheeks, not from fear, from something deeper. Grief, maybe. Gratitude. "I think it needed someone to carry it," she said, "the weight of remembering, and we did." I stepped closer, took her hand. "I don't want to carry it anymore," I said. "You don't have to," she whispered, "but it will always carry you." The next morning, we left before sunrise. No words, no goodbyes, just the sound of tires crunching gravel and the wind pressing softly against the van like an exhale. And as we drove away, I looked back one last time, and the canyon, vast and dark and impossibly old, looked back, and I felt seen. We didn't talk much on the drive home. Home was a fluid word by then. Not a place, not even the van, just wherever we could sleep without feeling watched. But after the canyon, everything else felt smaller, quieter, like the world had lost some of its edge, but not in a peaceful way. More like something essential had burned away and left a silence behind. We ended up in a small town in northern Colorado, the kind of place with one main street, a post office older than the pavement around it, and a library that still used cards. We rented a cabin, short-term, month to month. A-frame, stone fireplace, big windows that looked out into the trees. Erin unpacked her sketchbooks. I started journaling again. Not about the canyon, not directly, but the things we saw there lived between every line. There was one day, maybe 2 weeks in, when I found her outside at dusk, standing barefoot in the snow. She didn't look cold, just thoughtful. Her arms were crossed, eyes fixed on the woods. "What is it?" I asked. She didn't answer at first. "Then do you remember the cairn?" "Of course." "I think it wasn't a warning," she said. "I think it was a trailhead." The weight of that hit me so hard I had to sit down. A trailhead, not an end, a beginning. Maybe that was what all those markers were, not tombstones, not graves, just signs, directions. Start here, look deeper, listen better. After that night, the dreams came back. Not every night, but often enough. Not nightmares. Not anymore. Dreams of light filtering through canyon rock, impossible angles of stone that shimmered with memory. Voices, not whispering, but singing. Fractured melodies, as if sung through water. Sometimes I'd wake up crying and wouldn't know why. Sometimes Erin would hold my hand and not say anything. One morning I found a sketch she'd taped to the cabin wall. It wasn't like her usual work. It was rough, fast, almost frantic, charcoal lines bleeding into one another. But I recognized it immediately. The ledge, the one from the canyon. But in this sketch, there were figures on it, dozens, all of them facing away toward the open air. None with faces, just silhouettes, long, thin, slightly bent. Watching the void, I stared at it for a long time before I noticed the detail at the very bottom. 2 smaller shapes, one kneeling, one standing behind us. "They're not stuck," Erin said, stepping into the room. "They're still choosing, every moment, whether to remember or to let go." "Which is better?" I asked. She didn't answer. That night, I dreamt I was standing at the ledge again. Alone. But the canyon wasn't empty this time. It wasn't even a void. It was filled, layer upon layer of shape and motion and flickering echoes, like the whole space was woven from voices stretched across time. I looked down, and there were words carved into the stone beneath my feet. Just 4. "You heard us once." I woke up shaking. It's been 6 months now. We still traveled, though slower, more deliberately. No more chasing the next destination. We returned to places we've already been, places where the wind remembers how we smelled, where the trees seem to lean in when Aaron hums. We stay until we feel it. That presence, that pulse, that question. Will you carry this? Sometimes we say yes. Sometimes we don't. But we always listen. There are people who say the world is full of stories, like it's some poetic turn of phrase. I don't think it's a metaphor. I think there are places where the stone itself remembers, where the air waits for someone to breathe it just right so it can speak again. And I think we were lucky, or cursed, or chosen to have heard one. It changed us. Not like lightning, sudden and bright, more like water carving stone. We're still the same people, but the ground beneath us never quite feels solid anymore. And sometimes late at night when we camp alone and the fire burns low, Aaron will reach out, touch my arm, and whisper, "They're still singing." And I listen, and I believe, and I whisper back, "I know." Story 3. I used to believe the road was freedom. There's a moment when the sun breaks over the horizon, and you're the only thing moving for miles. Just you, your RV, the long ribbon of asphalt, and a sky too big to hold. That's what I used to chase. That feeling of weightlessness, of disappearing into America's forgotten corners, where the land stretches out like an open hand and the towns are barely more than ghosts. But freedom, I've learned, has a price. This story started in Utah. I was 39 then, divorced for 3 years, and burned out from the corporate job I'd walked away from. I'd sold everything that didn't fit inside my Forest River Georgetown XL. This wasn't a vacation. It was a pilgrimage. My plan was to travel state by state, campground by campground, until I found peace, or at least until the ache inside me quieted down enough to sleep. My route had no set destination. That was the beauty of it. I followed the weather, followed recommendations, followed my gut. But sometimes, the road takes you where it wants. That September, I found myself passing through central Utah. Sparse country, big mesas, red rock that looked like it bled when the light hit it just right. I pulled into a Bureau of Land Management site just outside of Hanksville. Free camping. No hookups, no cell service, just desert and silence. There were 3 other rigs parked when I arrived. One older couple in a Winnebago who waved politely and disappeared behind their shades. A school bus conversion with a dream catcher hanging in the back window, no one visible inside. And a smaller Class C with out-of-state plates and peeling decals, parked at the far edge of the canyon rim. I parked a good distance from everyone, gave them space. It's a kind of unspoken rule among RVers. Your neighbors, sure, but you're also trying to get away. That night, as the desert wind howled outside and the stars blanketed the sky, I felt small in a way that was comforting, like the universe didn't expect anything from me. But something else was there, too. It started as a sound. At first, I thought it was the wind, but wind doesn't tap. It came around midnight. I was lying in bed, half asleep, when I heard it, a soft, deliberate tapping on the outside of my RV. 3 knocks. Not random, not rushed. Then silence. I held my breath. Another set of knocks, slower this time, like someone was testing something. I pulled on a sweatshirt, grabbed my flashlight, and eased to the door. I didn't open it, just looked out the small window. Nothing. Just empty desert. But the air felt wrong, like it was holding its breath too. I thought maybe it was the wind rattling something loose, or maybe the folks in the Class C were messing around. I checked all my windows, locked the door, and went back to bed. But sleep didn't come. I kept replaying the sound in my mind. That rhythm. Like someone waiting for me to answer. The next morning, I walked over to the Class C. No one answered when I knocked, and the windows were covered with those blackout curtains you see in older rigs. Something about it made me uneasy. Not that people want privacy, but the complete stillness of it. Like the RV wasn't just empty, but abandoned. That evening, I decided to stay one more night before moving on. I told myself I was being paranoid. I even joked out loud, "All right, desert, you got me once. No encore tonight." But the desert listens. That night, the knocking came again, only this time, it moved. It started near the back of the RV, faint, like someone brushing against the exterior wall. Then another knock. Closer, a pause, another, like footsteps tracing the perimeter. I sat up in bed, my pulse hammering in my neck. My flashlight was already in my hand. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Then a voice, a whisper, too soft to make out the words, but close, right outside the window by my kitchenette. I stood up slowly, every instinct screaming not to be seen. I ducked low, moved to the window, lifted the curtain just enough to peek out. Still nothing, but the feeling, the air wasn't just heavy. It was watching me. I turned on all my exterior lights, walked the perimeter with my flashlight, no footprints, no marks, just wind-whipped dust and shadows that shifted when I wasn't looking. When I looked toward the Class C again, something was different. There was a light on inside, a dull orange glow, like a lamp turned low. But when I stepped closer, it flicked off. I didn't approach. Something in me, ancient and animal, said, "Don't." Back in my rig, I locked every window. Sat in the driver's seat with the engine off and the flashlight across my lap. I watched until sunrise, and when the sun finally rose, the Class C was gone. No sound of an engine in the night, no headlights sweeping past, just gone. And the strangest part, no tire tracks, not in that soft dust, not on the road leading out. Nothing. I left that morning. Drove 5 hours without stopping. I told myself it was exhaustion, maybe even a stress-induced hallucination. The desert can do that to you, isolate you, warp your sense of time and sound. But a week later, I was camped near Monticello, Utah. Different site, similar setup. BLM land with wide open spaces and plenty of dry air. I was 2 days into the stay when I saw it again, that Class C, parked on the far end of the clearing, facing away. Same faded decals. Same blacked out windows, same silent stillness. I watched it all day. No one came out, no generator noise, no movement. That night, the tapping came back. And this time, I didn't wait for it to reach the door. I fired up the engine at 1:17 a.m. and drove, pedal down, until I hit the highway. I didn't look back. Not once. I didn't care if I was overreacting. I'd trusted my gut before and regretted it when I didn't. That was 2 years ago. Since then, I've seen that RV 3 more times. Different states, different campsites, always the same pattern. Parked on the edges, quiet as the grave, vanishing without warning. I started asking around in online forums, other full-timers, off-grid campers, and slowly, quietly, I found them. People who'd seen it too. Some described it just like I had, silent, strange, always arriving at night. Others swore they'd spoken to someone inside, but their stories didn't match. One said it was a man in his 60s asking if they'd seen a missing dog. Another said it was a woman, barefoot, warning them about voices in the dust. The details never lined up, but the fear did. And then someone sent me a photo. A grainy cell phone shot from a campsite in Nevada, taken in 2015. And there it was. The same Class C, same peeling decals, same angle, same eerie emptiness. But here's the kicker. That RV was registered in 2001 and reported stolen in 2002. Police found it abandoned in the Mojave in 2004. Completely burned out, no bodies, no explanation, just ashes and a melted VIN plate. And yet, it's still out there. So when people ask me why I keep moving, why I never camp in the same spot twice, I just smile. Because freedom, like I said, has a price. And sometimes the road doesn't want to let go. The funny thing about fear is how quiet it gets after a while. It doesn't scream. It whispers. I didn't stop RVing after those encounters. Maybe I should have. A smarter man might have sold the rig, bought a condo somewhere in the city, buried the whole experience under new drywall and denial. But I'm not that man. I kept moving. Not out of courage, God no, but because I needed to understand. There's something about the open road that doesn't let you leave questions unanswered, especially when they follow you like shadows. The third time I saw the Class C, I was camped just north of Flagstaff, Arizona. The air was thinner there, cooler, with pine needles crunching underfoot instead of the baked clay I'd gotten used to. The elevation made everything feel closer to the sky, and for a while I convinced myself that meant I was safe. that I'd outrun it. I'd parked on a Forest Service road maybe 6 miles from pavement. No signs of other campers for 2 days. I spent my time walking trails, writing in my notebook, pretending that whatever haunted those Utah nights had dissolved somewhere in the heat shimmer. But fear, it doesn't dissolve. It adapts. That evening, while boiling water for coffee, I caught the unmistakable smell of cigarette smoke. I don't smoke. Never have. And I hadn't seen another vehicle in 36 hours. I stepped out of the RV, mug in hand, and scanned the tree line. Nothing but dusk. The smoke lingered, though. Faint, acrid, human. Not like a campfire, not like wood. Then I saw the reflection, just a flash, like the sun bouncing off glass. Not far off the road, maybe 50 yards, I squinted. The trees shifted in the breeze, but something was wrong with the way the shadows bent around one spot. I stared until my eyes burned. No sound. No movement. And then I knew. It was there. Hidden between the trees, angled just out of view. The Class C. I didn't wait. I didn't make coffee. I turned off everything, grabbed my pack, and climbed onto the roof of my RV with my binoculars. From up there, I could just barely make out the back corner of the vehicle. That same white paint streaked and cracked like old bone. The passenger door hung open. A length of tattered cloth fluttered from the side mirror. Still no sound. I stayed on that roof until the stars came out, until my fingers were stiff and my coffee had gone cold below me. It didn't move, didn't light up, didn't even close the door. Eventually, exhaustion won. I climbed down, locked every entry point, and slept in the driver's seat with a hunting knife in my lap. In the morning, it was gone. No tire tracks, no smell, just that quiet pine air pretending nothing had happened. But the footprints told another story. They circled my RV, not once, not twice, but 5 full rotations, different sizes, some deep and wide, others narrow, barefoot. No clear direction, no entry or exit path, just prints, like a ritual had been danced in the dirt around me while I slept. I didn't eat, didn't even pack properly. I drove until the forest turned to desert, then desert to suburbia, until I could lose myself in the normalcy of traffic and gas stations and the mindless rhythm of miles. That was the first time I considered quitting. I started looking at apartments online, half-heartedly scrolling through Craigslist listings for long-term rentals with parking, but I couldn't pull the trigger. The RV was more than my home. It was my shield, my only constant. And deep down, I knew this thing, whatever it wasn't tied to a place. It was tied to me. So I kept moving. Texas, Louisiana, then Georgia. I chased warm weather and safe distances, never staying longer than 2 nights in any one spot. I stopped talking to other RVers. I learned how to recognize the signs, the tension in my neck, the way silence thickened around me when something wasn't right. My instincts sharpened into weapons. But you can't outdrive the past, not when it walks. By the time I hit West Virginia, I'd almost convinced myself I was free. I was parked near Seneca Rocks under a canopy of summer green. It was peaceful in a way I hadn't felt in months. Birdsong, rushing river, a soft drizzle cooling the air. For the first time in weeks, I left my rig unlocked while I hiked. The trail was muddy but manageable. 2 miles in, I stopped to eat lunch on a moss-covered rock, overlooking a small waterfall. I let my mind drift. I even laughed, out loud like an idiot. I thought I was healing. And then I saw it. Not the Class C, not this time, but the woman. She stood on the far side of the river, unmoving. Barefoot, long hair matted to her shoulders, a torn sweatshirt hanging off one side. I blinked, thinking it was a hallucination. The distance between us was too wide for detail, but something about her posture, it wasn't curiosity. It was recognition. Like she'd been waiting. She didn't wave, didn't speak, just turned slowly and stepped into the trees, vanishing like smoke. I ran back to the RV. The door was open. Not wide, just slightly ajar, enough to let air in, enough to let something out. Inside, nothing was missing. Nothing was broken, but everything had been moved. My books were stacked differently. My hiking boots had been rotated toe in. My toothbrush was damp. Something had been there. Worse, something had stayed. I left without flushing the tank, straight to a public lot in town, and sat in the driver's seat for 6 hours, shaking. That night, in a motel, I opened my laptop. I didn't know what I was searching for: ghosts, missing persons, urban legends, but I found something else. A thread buried in a forgotten forum dated 2007. The title was simple: Shadow Campers. Hundreds of posts, people describing strange sightings at public lands, RVs that didn't make sound, people who appeared and vanished, barefoot and silent, whispers in the night, knock patterns. Some were hoaxes, obvious fiction, but others mirrored my experience too closely to ignore. And one post caught my eye. A man named Robert Mendez, retired park ranger from New Mexico, wrote, "They're not just ghosts, they're remnants. People who camped too long in the wrong places, walked too deep into the dark, listened too closely to the quiet. The land doesn't forget. Some places chew people up and wear their skin." That line stuck with me. Some places chew people up and wear their skin. I saved the post, printed it, read it until I could hear his voice in my sleep, because deep down, I knew what he meant. I wasn't just seeing ghosts. I was seeing possibilities, reflections of what I might become. If I stayed too long or listened too closely or camped in the wrong place one time too many. And somewhere out there, beyond the reach of headlights and reason, something was waiting, watching, still circling. A few weeks later, I found myself deep in the Smoky Mountains, parked on a disused fire road that hadn't seen a ranger in years. I don't know why I went there. Maybe I wanted answers. Maybe I just wanted it to end. I'd been pushing farther and farther from civilization, trying to either outrun the thing or face it head on. Either way, I wasn't going to hide anymore. That patch of forest was thick with fog, the kind that clings to your skin, makes the world feel smaller. Trees towered on either side of the narrow path, their limbs bent like old bones. My rig groaned as I inched along the uneven trail, tires kicking up damp leaves. The GPS had lost its signal 5 miles back. No service, no voices, no backup. Exactly what I wanted. I parked in a clearing surrounded by oak and laurel. No bird song, no insects, just the creaking of trees like the forest had been holding its breath for years and had finally remembered to exhale. I killed the engine and listened. Stillness like that isn't peaceful, it's charged, like every molecule in the air is waiting for something to move, something to break. I stepped outside, boots crunching soft under the wet loam. I didn't bother setting up camp, just walked the perimeter of the clearing, noting every tree, every pattern in the dirt. There were faint tracks in the mud, not fresh, but too defined to be from deer. Narrow, barefoot, long. I followed them. They twisted between trees and vanished near a creek bed. And there, in the damp moss beside the water, I saw something that made my stomach drop. A handprint, pressed into the moss, too big to be mine. 5 fingers, slightly splayed, deep enough that it must have been made within the last day. But no other prints, no signs of a body falling. Just that single, deliberate mark, as if someone had crouched there, watching. I walked back to the RV and sat in the doorway, staring into the trees. I didn't lock the door, didn't turn on lights. If this thing wanted me, it wouldn't matter. The night came slow. The fog thickened. My breath fogged the inside of the windows, and then I heard it. Not knocking, not whispering, humming. A low, tuneless murmur, like a lullaby sung with no melody. It came from the woods, no more than 20 feet away. I sat frozen, heart thudding, every instinct inside me screaming to run. But where? The humming stopped. Silence. Then, a knock. 3 taps, slow, soft, like fingertips brushing the aluminum skin of the rig, but not at the door, at the window beside me. I didn't look, couldn't, because I felt it. Not just the presence, but the intent. The thing outside, whatever it was, didn't want in. It wanted me out. I gripped the wheel, put the key in the ignition, and then I heard my name, whispered from behind me, inside the rig. I turned, flashlight in hand, sweeping the beam across the interior empty. Of course it was. But the air was colder, and on the condensation of the back window, a smear. Not a word, not a symbol, just a streak, as if a hand had pressed against the glass from the inside. I drove until morning, didn't stop for fuel, didn't eat, didn't breathe right until I saw the sun rise behind a truck stop outside Knoxville. That was the moment I knew. It had crossed a line. It wasn't out there anymore. It was with me. After that, things changed. Not dramatically, not suddenly, subtly. I'd wake up to find cabinet doors open, radio static that only stopped when I shut the thing off completely, lights flickering when the battery was full. Once I heard the shower turn on at 3 a.m., full pressure, steaming water, even though my tank had been empty for 2 days. But worse than all of that was the feeling, the sense that I was being watched, not just from outside, but from within. Like the thing had found a home inside the walls of my RV, stitched itself into the wiring, the insulation, the frame, and maybe into me. I stopped going into towns. I stopped talking to other campers. My eyes were sunken. My hands trembled. I barely recognized myself. I told myself this would pass, that it was stress, that I needed sleep. But deep down, I knew better. It wanted me to break, to isolate myself, to hollow out until there was nothing left but space enough for it to fill. And that's when I remembered the post, Robert Mendez, the ranger, the one who'd said they weren't ghosts, they were remnants, people who'd listened too closely, camped too long, worn thin until the wilderness slipped inside. I found an old flip phone in a junk drawer, burner from a past trip, no apps, no connection to my main number. I dialed the number Robert had listed, not expecting it to work. It rang. Twice. Then a click. Yeah? His voice was old, gruff, dry. I didn't waste time. I told him who I was, what I'd seen. The silence on the other end was terrifying. Then he said, "Where are you parked right now?" "South Carolina," I said. "Pisgah Forest, near the old logging road." He hissed through his teeth. "You need to move," he said. "Tonight." "Why?" "Because that's one of the gates." "What kind of gate?" But he was already hanging up. I didn't pack, didn't check anything, just turned the key and left. Drove until the forest turned to lowland, and I was surrounded by open road and fences and the humming of things I could see. But the question haunted me. What kind of gate? He never answered. But now I think I know. Some campgrounds are just campgrounds, but some are places where the veil thins, where things watch the watchers, where if you listen too long to the wind, it starts to listen back. And sometimes it answers. I've stopped sleeping in national forests. I avoid BLM land. I stick to crowded RV parks, noisy truck stops, even KOAs, places full of light, full of people, because I'm no longer afraid of what's out there. I'm afraid of what might already be with me. And most of all, I'm afraid I'll stop being afraid, because that's when it wins. You'd think I'd be used to it by now, the near encounters, the strange voices, the rules of isolation that never came printed in any RV manual. But the truth is, you never get used to being haunted. Not in a way that lets you relax. It just changes the rhythm of your fear. It was in Alabama that I realized something had shifted in me. Not just the fear, but the behavior. I'd driven south out of necessity, not choice. I was chasing warmth as winter nipped at the edges of fall, trying to stay just ahead of freezing temperatures. The place I stopped at was a county-owned RV park outside Demopolis. Cheap, quiet, half forgotten. When I pulled in, there were only 2 other rigs in the lot. A Class A that hadn't moved in days, and a pop-up camper that sagged in the middle like it had weathered too many storms. That night, I double-locked every door. Not out of caution, but instinct. And for the first time in months, I dreamed. It wasn't a normal dream. Not vivid, not symbolic. It was a memory. I was in the Utah desert again, that first encounter, except this time I wasn't inside the RV looking out. I was outside, knocking. I woke up standing in the middle of the gravel lot, barefoot, door of the rig wide open behind me. The sky was dark but not silent. Somewhere in the distance, coyotes cried in that high, mournful pitch that sounds too much like a child screaming. I didn't scream. I didn't panic. I just walked back inside, checked myself for injuries, and sat down. And for the first time since it all began, I asked out loud, "What do you want?" Nothing answered. Of course nothing answered. But I felt it. That subtle shift in the air, like something had been heard. That night was the first time I thought about the idea of being claimed. not possessed, not stalked, claimed, like the land had taken notice, like the thing in the Class C wasn't hunting, it was inviting. And every mile I put on the odometer, every tank I burned trying to escape it, it just drew me in deeper. Not like a chase, like a gravity, like I was coming home. I stopped driving for a while after that. Stayed in that Alabama campground for 6 straight nights, longer than I'd stayed anywhere in over a year. I watched the other rigs, watched the woods, listened to the wind. I heard no knocks, no whispers, and it terrified me because it meant the cycle was changing and I didn't know what came next. On the 7th night, I met someone. Her name was Clara, early 50s, drove a compact trailer hitched to a dusty Toyota Tundra. She parked 2 spots down from me and lit a fire the first night she arrived. When I passed her site, she looked up and said, "You got that hunted look." Same one I had when I left Oregon. I stopped. She motioned me over like she already knew I'd say yes. We talked for hours about the road, about what we'd seen. She'd been RVing solo for 9 years, said she'd seen too many things that didn't belong in daylight, too many faces that looked human until they opened their mouths and nothing came out but static. I asked her if she'd ever seen the Class C. She didn't answer right away. Then she nodded. Saw it once in Arizona. Petrified forest. Thought it was a mirage. It followed me to New Mexico. After that, I started carrying iron nails in my shoes. Nails? She tapped the sole of her hiking boot. Old protection trick for things that don't like what's real. That night, she gave me a bundle of twine wrapped around 3 rusted railroad nails. Told me to hang it from my rearview mirror. It won't stop them, she said, but it might slow them down. I laughed. Not because I thought she was wrong, but because it was the first time anyone had said them, plural. I hung the bundle that night, and for 3 nights I slept without incident. On the 4th, I woke up to the sound of Clara screaming. I tore outside barefoot, flashlight jerking wildly, and found her crouched beside her trailer, staring into the woods. "I saw it," she whispered. "It was in my rig, just standing there." "Who?" She looked at me, and her eyes were full of a sorrow I didn't understand yet. "You." I froze. She shook her head. "Not you, but it looked like you. Same clothes, same eyes, except the face was wrong. Wrong how? Like it was borrowed, like it didn't quite know how to wear it." I helped her pack that morning. She left without saying goodbye. And I sat in my RV for hours, staring at my own reflection in the window, studying it, looking for something out of place. Because what if that's how it works? Not by chasing, not by attacking, but by becoming, by replacing. I started noticing differences after that, subtle things. My voice on a recording sounded flatter, like someone mimicking the way I speak. My scent changed. I smelled like damp pine, even in the desert. I caught my reflection blinking out of sync with my eyes once in a roadside diner window. I laughed it off, until I couldn't. The final straw was in Mississippi, a rest stop just past Tupelo, middle of the day, bright sunshine, heavy traffic, safe. I went to wash my hands in the restroom, and standing at the far sink was me, not someone who looked like me. Me. Same clothes, same scar on the eyebrow, same tired posture, but the eyes, they weren't mine. They were black, all black, and when it smiled, it didn't move its mouth. Its skin just stretched like it had forgotten how faces worked. I didn't scream, didn't move. It stared at me for 5 seconds, long enough for the world to tilt. Then it walked out. Not fast, not slow, like it knew exactly where it was going, like it had been here before. I drove all night after that. Didn't stop, didn't eat, didn't blink unless I had to, because now I understood the real horror. It wasn't the ghosts, it wasn't the creatures, it wasn't even the shadows that followed you from forest to forest to forest. It was this, that something out there is trying to become me. And every time I run, it learns. After Mississippi, the road stopped feeling like an escape. Every state line I crossed felt less like a new beginning and more like another lock clicking shut behind me. I wasn't running anymore. I was circling, like a fly caught in a jar it couldn't see. No matter how far I drove, how many precautions I took, I kept ending up in places I didn't mean to be, campgrounds I hadn't planned for. Dirt roads that didn't show up on GPS. And worse, I stopped remembering how I got there. I'd wake up with the RV already parked, engine still ticking from the heat, my boots by the door still muddy and my logbook filled in, except I didn't recall writing any of it. The handwriting was mine. The language wasn't. Phrases like, "the veil is thinner here and we watch ourselves sleep." Once I found a page that simply said, in jagged, frantic strokes, "I let it drive." That was the night I stopped writing altogether. I tried everything to break the cycle. Switched out rigs, rented a completely different model in Missouri, left my original Forest River Georgetown at a storage facility in Arkansas. No notes, no forwarding plans. Just walked away and drove off in a rented Winnebago. I made it 3 days. On the fourth, while parked behind a closed-down bait shop outside Lake Eufaula, I stepped out for a smoke. I'd started again, and froze. Because parked 2 spots down from me, between a dented minivan and a pickup covered in moss, was the Georgetown. My RV, the one I'd left 2 states behind. Same bumper sticker, same chipped headlight, same goddamn smudge on the side mirror from a storm in Idaho the year before. I approached it slowly, shaking, flashlight in hand. The windows were dark, but the door was unlocked. Inside, everything was exactly how I'd left it. Even the burnt coffee in the pot congealed at the bottom. But on the bed was a journal. Not mine. The cover was made of cracked leather. Stiff. Felt wrong in my hands, like it had been underground for years. I opened it. Inside were pages and pages of entries, none signed, none dated. Different handwriting, sometimes different languages. Some were drawings, some nothing but symbols, but they all described the same thing. People like me, RV travelers, campers, loners who had vanished into the quiet. One wrote about hearing whispers in the sound of their generator. Another described a knock pattern that matched the Morse code for open. Another said they had seen a second sun rising in their rearview mirror, and when they looked again, it was gone, but their reflection in the mirror was smiling. What stopped me cold was the last page. It had my name, first and last, underlined. Beneath it, scrawled in a shaky hand, "You are the last watcher." I slammed the journal shut and left it behind. Drove until my tank was empty and coasted into a Walmart parking lot near Shreveport with less than half a mile to spare. Slept in the driver's seat with the engine off, lights on, hand wrapped around the wheel like a lifeline. That's where I met Doug. Big guy, maybe late 60s, grizzled beard and a stare like steel that had been through the fire more than once. He knocked on my window around 6 a.m., startled me half to death. I cracked it open, ready to tell him to shove off. But he didn't say anything at first, just looked at me. Then quietly, "You seen it too, haven't you?" I didn't answer. Didn't have to. He climbed into his rig, came back 5 minutes later with a tin of coffee and a shotgun. We talked for hours. Turns out Doug had been on the road since '96, former Navy. Said he started noticing things go sideways around 2003. Patterns. Symbols carved into trees that weren't there the day before. Campers disappearing from sites without a trace. Said he once watched an RV that looked just like his pull into a lot, park next to him, and no one ever got out. 3 days it sat there, then gone. When I told him about the Class C, he nodded like he already knew. "They're called echoes," he said. "Echoes of what?" I asked. He hesitated. "Of you. Of me, of all of us. They're reflections, prototypes maybe, failures. The road remembers every soul it swallows, and sometimes it spits parts back out, wearing our faces." I stared at him, not even blinking. "How do you stop it?" He chuckled, dry and bitter. "You don't." Then his face darkened. "But you can make sure it doesn't finish." That night, Doug showed me how to ward the rig. Iron nails under the tires, salt lines across the doorway. He handed me an old cassette tape labeled "White Noise Appalachian Hum, Do Not Erase." Told me to play it any time I heard knocking. "It confuses them," he said. "Sound without intention. They hate that." It worked for a while, or maybe I believed it did, because belief, I've learned, is a kind of armor, and mine was running thin. The final time I saw the Echo, I was on a stretch of Highway 191 near the Arizona border, just past midnight. Road was empty, dead straight, desert on both sides, flat and silent. My headlights caught something ahead, a shape in the road. I slowed. It was an RV, the Class C, middle of the road, lights off, no sign of movement. But this time, the door was open, wide open, and inside, barely visible in the dark, was me, standing, motionless, staring out the door. I didn't stop. I swerved, nearly hit a ditch. I didn't look back, because I knew if I did, I might not see the road again. And even if I did, how would I know it was me behind the wheel? How would I know it ever had been? I didn't stop driving until the sun rose. Somewhere past the Colorado state line, I found myself pulling into a gravel turnout on the side of a ridge, the kind with a thin wooden guardrail that looks like it would do nothing if you misjudged the edge. Below me, the land spread out in jagged slices of pine, shadow, and stone. For the first time in months, I turned the engine off and let the silence press in. There are two kinds of silence on the road. One is peace. The other is a trap, and I still couldn't tell which one I was sitting in. I got out, barefoot, my soles aching from the vibrations of the road. The wind up there was different, high and thin, full of that altitude whisper that makes your skin prickle, like something ancient is humming just beyond human hearing. I leaned on the guardrail and looked down into the canyon. And I said, out loud to nothing and everything, "What do you want from me?" Not a scream, not a plea, just weary honesty. And that's when I felt it, behind me. Not the sound of movement, no snapping twig, no crunch of gravel, just a shift in the pressure of the world. A presence, like someone standing so close behind you that you feel the air move before the touch comes. I didn't turn around. Instead, I spoke again, quieter this time. I remember who I am. A pause. The wind blew harder, my breath fogged in the morning chill. You can take my face, you can take my name, but I remember who I am. And just like that, it was gone. The pressure lifted, the silence became silence again, not the hungry kind, the real kind. I turned slowly, nothing there, not even a footprint. But in the driver's seat of my RV, visible through the windshield, was the cassette tape Doug gave me. I hadn't left it there, and it was already playing, just soft white noise and that low Appalachian hum that made the hairs on my arms rise. I stepped back inside, sat in the passenger seat, and listened. I don't know how long I sat there. Could have been an hour, could have been 5. But at some point I realized something had changed. The fear was still there, but now it wasn't just fear of being followed. It was fear of forgetting, because that's the real danger. Not that something out there wears your face, but that you start to forget what your own face looks like without it, that you forget where your voice ends and the echo begins. I've been on the road for 4 years now, full time. I've crossed every state, stayed in more campgrounds than I can count. I've seen shadows that walked like men, heard voices through the vents. I've watched my reflection move before I did. And still, I drive. Not because I'm brave, not because I'm running, but because I remember. I remember that night in Utah. The knocks, the silence, the first feeling of being watched. I remember Clara and her iron nails. Doug and his cassette tape. The handprint in the moss. The me that wasn't me. I remember the ones who didn't make it. And I know this now as clear as I know the feel of gravel under my tires. There are places in this country where the land doesn't just hold memory, it feeds on it. Campgrounds where time doesn't flow the right way. Forest roads that lead somewhere older than roads should. Voices that borrow your tone. Eyes that don't blink. Places that echo you back. Distorted, hungry. But they only win if you forget. So I speak my name every morning when I wake. I say it out loud no matter how ridiculous it feels. I'm Alex. I'm 39. I drive a Georgetown XL. I was born in Spokane. My mother's name was Nora. My dog's name was Wiley. Because that's how you fight it. Not with iron, not with salt, but with memory, with truth, with the refusal to let the road swallow you whole. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd opened the door that first night. If I'd answered the knock, would I be one of them now? Would someone else be writing this story in a voice that sounds like mine but isn't? I don't know, but I do know this. If you're out there, if you're thinking of hitting the open road, chasing freedom in the wild spaces between towns, remember, not all ghosts are dead. Some are still driving, still knocking, still waiting for someone to forget who they are just long enough for something else to slip inside. So when the knocking comes, and it will, don't answer, don't speak. And whatever you do, don't forget your name, because the most terrifying RV encounters on the open road aren't the ones you see. They're the ones that see you. And if you're not careful, they'll wear you like a coat and keep driving forever. Story 4. They always say, the desert doesn't forget, but I think it does something worse. It watches, quietly, patiently, and if you stay too long, it doesn't just remember you, it keeps you. I didn't believe that sort of thing before. I thought superstition was something you packed away with old maps and broken compasses, but then again, I used to think RV parks were safe, that no matter how far out you went, no matter how empty the land felt, if there were hookups, picnic tables, you were still tethered to something solid, something human. But out in the Southwest, beneath those massive skies and sun-bleached cliffs, things vanish. Sound, time, people. And one summer, I nearly vanished with them. It started with a simple plan. I was 34, recently divorced, and driving a 2016 Winnebago View that I bought used from a retired couple in Utah. I wasn't chasing ghosts, I was trying to shake mine. The open road was supposed to help. I'd been living in Phoenix most of my life, but after the divorce, the city felt small and loud in all the wrong ways. I craved space, silence, the kind you only find out in the desert. So I headed northeast toward the borderlands of Arizona and New Mexico, planning to hop from state park to state park, photographing wildlife and writing in the evenings. It was supposed to be a 2-week trip, but I ended up in a place that wasn't on my map. The name of the RV park was Whispering Mesa, and yeah, I should have taken the hint. It wasn't on my original route. I'd just left Petrified Forest National Park and was headed toward Chaco Canyon, but a sign on the highway caught my eye. The paint was cracked and faded, but the arrow was clear. Whispering Mesa RV and Campground, 3 miles ahead. I don't know why I turned. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I was bored. Or maybe something in me was already unraveling. The road in was narrow and dusty, with crumbling fences and red rock formations that loomed like forgotten gods. I didn't see another vehicle the whole drive in, just one dilapidated trailer off to the side of the road, half swallowed by sand and creosote bush. I should have turned around then. I even slowed down. But I told myself not to be paranoid. Desert towns are like that, wide, quiet, and spread thin. The RV park looked better than I expected. A small office cabin with a porch, about a dozen pull-through spots, each with water and electric hookups. A few other rigs were scattered through the park, mostly older Class Cs and trailers, the kind that looked like they'd been parked for longer than a weekend. I pulled in, walked up to the office, and met Frank. Frank was probably late 50s, leathery skin, sun-bleached hair that hadn't seen a comb in days. He wore an old mechanic's shirt with the name stitched over the chest and aviator sunglasses that never quite left his face. Day or weekly? He asked. Not unfriendly, but not exactly warm either. Just a night or two, I said. Heading up toward Chaco. He scribbled something on a pad and handed me a slip. Site 9. That one's level. I tried to make small talk, asked if the cell service was decent. He just gave a slow shake of the head and said, "Not much signal out here. That's part of the charm." I laughed, and he didn't. Site 9 was toward the back of the park, closer to a low ridge that looked out over a dry arroyo. I backed in, leveled the RV, hooked up, and stepped outside into silence. Not the usual kind you get in rural areas where birds chatter and insects buzz. No, this was absolute. Like the air itself was holding its breath. Even the wind moved differently, low and strange, like it didn't want to be overheard. That night, I sat out with a beer and watched the sun dissolve into the mesa. The other RVs around me glowed faintly with the yellow light of televisions or lanterns, but I didn't see a single person. No laughter, no music, no one walking dogs or grilling or chatting, just dim lights behind tinted glass. It was like everyone was watching, but not participating. At around 11 p.m., I finally went inside. I was brushing my teeth when I heard it, the sound that still knots my stomach even now. Knock, knock, knock. 3 quick taps right on the side of the RV. Not the door, the side, near the back wheel well. I froze, toothbrush still in my mouth. Knock, knock, knock. I spit, grabbed my flashlight, and flung open the door. Nothing. No footsteps. No animals. Just the quiet hum of the electric hookup and the distant wind brushing over sand and brush. I walked around the RV. No one. No prints in the dust. No sign of anything disturbed. Just me in that yawning, endless dark. Back inside, I locked the door, even checked the windows. I didn't sleep well. The next morning, I walked up to the office and told Frank someone had knocked on my rig during the night. He didn't react the way I expected. No concern, no surprise, just a slow nod, like I'd said something painfully obvious. "Kids," he muttered. "Sometimes folks mess around." I asked if there were cameras, and he said no. Then he added something strange. "You're not the first," he said. "Sometimes people hear things. Nothing to worry about." But it did worry me. A lot. And when I looked around again in the daylight, something about the park seemed off. I counted the RVs, 9 total, including mine, but over the next 6 hours, I saw no one come or go. Not one door opened. Not one person emerged to sit outside or stretch their legs. There was movement. Yes, curtains shifting, flickers of light. But it felt orchestrated, like puppets behind a stage. Something pretending to be alive, but wrong when you look too close. That afternoon, I took a walk toward the ridge behind the park. I figured some fresh air might clear my head. From the top of the ridge, you could see for miles. Arroyos, plateaus, a few scattered trailers farther out, the kind of forgotten terrain that made you feel like the last human on Earth. As I stood there, I noticed something. Off to the right, half a mile away. A flicker of movement near one of the ravines. I squinted and saw what looked like a person, a woman, walking along the dry creek bed. She was barefoot. That was the first odd thing. The second was how slowly she was moving. Like she wasn't walking to anywhere, just existing in motion. I started to call out, then stopped. Something in me said not to. She hadn't seen me. And as she drifted behind a rock formation, I had the terrible, unshakable feeling she wasn't supposed to be seen. That night, I kept the RV lights off. Sat in the dark with just a flashlight watching through the side window. At 1:17 a.m., the knocking came again. But this time it was different. Knock, knock. Silence. Knock. Silence. Knock, 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 knock. I grabbed the flashlight, moved slowly to the door, and pressed my ear to it. No breathing, no whispering, just stillness. And then a low, dragging sound, like fingers brushing across the fiberglass side panel, moving from the rear of the rig toward the cab. I stayed frozen in place. My heart thudded so loud in my chest, I swear it drowned out every other sound. The flashlight in my hand was trembling, casting shaky light along the RV floor like a strobe. I moved to the front slowly, step by step, until I was crouched low behind the driver's seat, peering through the side window toward the front passenger side. Nothing. Just the skeletal outline of the nearest creosote bush, bending in the breeze. My own reflection staring back at me in the glass. I waited. 5 minutes, then 10. I didn't hear the dragging again. No more knocking. But I didn't sleep that night either. By the time the sky began to pale in the east, my mind was unraveling. I'd been RVing for years, been in grizzly country, endured lightning storms in the Smokies, even dealt with a meth head who tried to siphon my gas in Northern California. But this was different. I wasn't just afraid. I was unmoored. Like the place itself didn't want me there and wasn't just passively showing it. It was doing something to me. Quietly. Patiently. I decided to leave that morning. When I stepped out to disconnect the hookups, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. On the rear panel of the Winnebago, just above the bumper, were 5 long, thin smears, dust brushed away in lines, like fingertips or claws. They weren't there the day before. I hadn't backed into any branches, and the spacing was too narrow to be from an animal. I didn't take a photo. I should have, but I didn't want proof. I just wanted out. I walked to the office to tell Frank I was leaving early, but the office was locked, closed sign swinging in the window. I knocked, waited, then tried calling the number posted on the window. Straight to voicemail. So I left cash in an envelope, slid it under the door, and hauled out of there. As I turned onto the narrow access road, I saw something in my rearview mirror that nearly made me swerve. Frank was standing at the edge of the park, just standing, watching, not waving, not walking, just still, one hand raised slightly like halfway to a wave but never committing. I didn't stop. I didn't look back again. I just drove. But the road didn't lead where I expected. I followed my GPS, which had finally kicked back on about 15 minutes into the drive. It showed a clear route, cutting across some BLM land, then connecting back to the highway. But after an hour, the dirt road began to narrow, then split into two. Then two became none. I found myself bouncing over sagebrush and ruts, the tires kicking up dust into a rising sun that felt increasingly hostile. The heat was climbing fast, 107 by noon, and the land seemed to stretch and twist in ways that didn't line up with the map. Eventually, I came across a gas station, or what was left of one. It was a weather-peeled ruin, long abandoned. The pumps were torn out, the windows broken. A rusted sign still hung crooked above the door, the word Gulf barely visible under layers of decay. But there was something behind the building. 2 RVs, parked, covered in dust, and utterly, unmistakably still. I stopped the Winnebago about 30 yards out and climbed down slowly, cautiously. The silence was deep again, not dead like the Whispering Mesa campground, but old, forgotten, heavy with weight. I walked to the first RV, an older coachman, curtains drawn, doors locked, but the tires, they were flat, cracked. This thing hadn't moved in years. The second was a fifth wheel, also covered in dust, but something about it was fresher, less decay. I walked up to the window and cupped my hands to the glass. Inside, it looked frozen in time. A coffee mug on the counter, a paperback book face down on the bed, and a journal. Just sitting there, open, pages fluttering in the slight breeze from a roof vent that had long since lost its seal. I circled to the door. It wasn't locked. I hesitated. Then I stepped inside. The air smelled like old wood and something faintly sweet, like dried fruit, or rot, but subtle. I moved toward the journal. Its cover was brown leather, cracked at the edges. I flipped it to the front. It belonged to a woman named Erin, from Albuquerque, 41. She'd been traveling solo, visiting spiritual sites in the Southwest. There were entries from Canyon de Chelly, Acoma Pueblo, and El Malpais. And then I saw this, scrawled on a page near the end. The man at the Whispering Mesa Park said I could stay longer, but I feel wrong here. Time slips. The clocks don't match. I keep hearing footsteps outside the RV, but no one's ever there. I asked the couple in the trailer next door if they'd heard anything. They just stared at me, like I hadn't spoken. Last night I woke up to tapping, not knocking, tapping, like nails on the windows. I tried to leave, but the road circled back. It always circles back. I think it's not a park. I think it's a mouth. That word hit me hard. Mouth. I closed the journal and backed out of the RV slowly, the hair on my arms standing straight up. There was a sound behind me, a soft shuffling. I spun around. Nothing. But the light had changed. The sun had dipped behind a cloud, or what I thought was a cloud. But it cast no shadow. The air grew cooler. The silence deepened, and I felt a presence. Not a person. Not a creature. Something older. Watching. I ran. Got back in the Winnebago and drove, tires bouncing and skidding as I retraced my route, ignoring the GPS. I turned the rig back the way I came, drove until the sun was overhead again, until the earth looked right, until the sagebrush felt like sagebrush and not some trick of memory or mirage. Eventually I hit pavement. A real road. A gas station that actually worked. People. Sound. I didn't stop driving until I hit Gallup. I stayed at a KOA that night. Well lit. full of kids and barking dogs and laughter and the kind of noise that tells you the world is still spinning the way it's supposed to. I didn't sleep much, but I was safe. Or at least, I thought I was, until I checked the back of the Winnebago again the next morning. The 5 lines were still there, fresh, clean, as if drawn by someone who had just visited. Only this time, there were 6. I stared at that 6th smear for what felt like hours. I didn't even realize I'd dropped my coffee until the sound of the styrofoam cup hitting the asphalt snapped me out of it. 6 lines. Not 5. 6. Clean as if someone had dragged their fingers through the dust just minutes ago. I ran my hand along the fiberglass panel, half hoping it would brush away. It didn't. The smears were embedded in the thin coat of desert grit, perfectly parallel. Not made by a child, not made by an animal, not by any creature that should have had 6 fingers. I left the KOA by sunrise. I told myself I was heading east home, done with the trip entirely. But my hands, they steered differently. And my mind, my thoughts kept returning to that journal. To the woman named Erin, whose words still echoed in my ears. I think it's not a park. I think it's a mouth. I wanted to believe she'd been confused, paranoid, unwell. But the moment I read those words, I felt something in me tighten, as if part of me had already come to that conclusion and she'd only given it form. The way the place curved inward, how the road kept folding back, the silence, the watchers behind dark glass. Yeah, it was a mouth. A place that drew people in and didn't let go. I should have gone to the police, reported the strange park, the abandoned RVs, the journal. But what was I going to say? There's a campground in the desert that rearranges roads and taps on your rig at night. They'd think I was off my meds, or needed some. So instead, I stopped in a diner off I-40 and ordered pancakes I barely touched. I asked the waitress if she'd ever heard of Whispering Mesa. She looked at me like I'd said a curse word. You mean that old stretch west of Crown Point? Yeah, I said cautiously. She lowered her voice. Used to be some kind of hippie spot in the 70s. Land trust, I think. Then it turned into a church retreat, then a campground. Now she trailed off. Folks don't go out there much, not unless they're passing through. Why not? She hesitated. People go missing. I waited for her to elaborate. She didn't. She just filled my coffee and said, "Don't stay out past sundown." That afternoon, I found a library in Grants. It was quiet, air-conditioned, mostly empty. I got on one of the old public terminals and started digging. I searched Whispering Mesa RV disappearance, Campground New Mexico lost hikers, Erin Albuquerque spiritual Southwest RV. Nothing. No missing persons matching her name, no headlines, no reports. But I did find something. An archived local blog from the early 2000s. Low-res, clunky design, white courier text on a black background. It was maintained by a man named Julian R., last name redacted, who claimed to be researching thin places in the Southwest. I almost ignored it until I saw one of his last entries, dated 2004. Was camping near a site locals call La Boca del Silencio, the Mouth of Silence. Real name now is Whispering Mesa RV Campground. Nothing whispers there, things listen. And if you stay too long, they remember your name. Road out loops back. Time does strange things. I left after hearing knocking on my camper 3 nights in a row. Found 6 smears on the back door. Never went back. Never will. I pushed back from the computer so fast my chair squealed. 6 smears. I wasn't the first, not even close, and no one was doing anything about it. I thought about Erin again. Her RV sitting out in the middle of nowhere, her journal, her quiet descent into fear, the calm before she vanished. I could have just walked away, counted myself lucky. But I didn't. I went back. Not because I'm brave, not because I wanted answers, because I couldn't sleep, because I kept hearing that sound, that knocking, even when I was miles away, even when I was parked in a crowded campground or next to a bustling gas station. I'd close my eyes and I'd hear it. Knock, knock. Drag, knock. It was in me now. So I made a plan. I drove to a Walmart in Gallup, bought trail cameras, 6 of them, motion-activated night vision, bought a drone too, one with infrared and a good battery life. Then I stocked up on gas, water, backup chargers, and enough supplies to keep me functional for a few days if I got stuck again. I waited 2 more nights, parked in the safety of a crowded casino lot, but the urge didn't go away. If anything, it grew stronger, like a thread wrapped around my chest, tugging tighter with each breath. So finally, I gave in. The road back to Whispering Mesa was just as empty. The turnoff sign was still there, that's though someone had spray painted a giant black X over it. I followed the same path, my fingers clenched white around the wheel. The park looked the same rigs sat in the same positions, no one moved, no lights on, no sound. Like they were waiting. I didn't check in at the office. I pulled into Site 9, killed the engine and waited. Didn't hook up. Didn't step out. Just sat in the driver's seat, breathing shallow, heart loud in my ears. Then I saw him. Frank, standing by the cabin, watching, same half wave. I didn't wave back. Instead, I deployed the drone. I launched it quietly, slowly, using the feed on my tablet to scan the area. From above, the campground was an almost perfect oval. Too perfect. The RVs looked like teeth embedded evenly along the perimeter, and in the center, just behind the office building, was something I hadn't noticed before. A depression in the earth. Wide. Circular, like a sinkhole that hadn't fully formed. I steered the drone lower, scanning the area. Heat signatures appeared from the rigs, faint, unmoving, like someone sitting very still, or not alive at all. Then the tablet glitched. For a second, just one blink, all the signatures vanished. The screen went dark. Then the drone feed returned, showing my own RV. Only now, I wasn't alone. There was someone or something standing behind my rig. I dropped the tablet. It clattered to the RV floor, the screen flickering once before going dark. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't move, couldn't think. Just listened, waiting for the knock. It didn't come. Instead, I heard something worse. Breathing. Not mine. A slow rattling inhale. Then a wet, sighing exhale, right outside my back wall. I crouched down, crab walking across the floor until I reached the bathroom. I killed every light, silenced my phone, held my breath. More breathing. Then footsteps. Light. Precise. Like someone gliding around the perimeter of my rig, dragging fingers along the fiberglass. Then silence. Minutes passed. 10? Maybe 20? Finally, I crawled up to the cab, peeked out the driver's side window. Frank was gone. So were the other rigs. All of them. The entire park was empty. Even the office. I blinked, shook my head, looked again. Gone. Only my RV remained. I opened the door and stepped out, gravel crunching beneath my boots. No tire tracks, no sounds, no heat, just the wind and that strange circular depression behind the office. I walked toward it slowly, clutching the flashlight in one hand and the journal I'd brought from Aaron's trailer in the other. I didn't know why I brought it, maybe for proof, maybe for courage. But now I was starting to wonder if bringing it back had called something. The depression wasn't just a low point in the land. It was a shape, perfectly round, rimmed with smooth, dark stone, and the air above it shimmered. Not heat haze, something else. Like the veil between two layers of fabric, earth, and something beneath. I tossed a rock into it, no sound. I tossed another, same. Then I heard a voice, a woman's voice. Very faint. Help. I froze. Please, help me. It was Erin. I knew it, the same cadence I'd imagined from her journal, the same tone I heard in my sleep since the day I'd found her fifth-wheel trailer. I leaned closer to the depression. Erin? I whispered, down here. The surface shimmered again, light rippled across it like oil in water. I should have run, should have turned and never looked back. But I stepped forward. The world tipped. The gravel beneath my boots disappeared. The light changed. The sky flipped from blue to black, and I was somewhere else. I stood in a corridor made of red stone, curved like a tunnel but smooth as glass. The air was thick and humming, like being inside a massive, sleeping body. I turned in slow circles, my flashlight beam bouncing uselessly off the walls. Then I saw them. The RVs, not parked, stacked, dozens of them, some cracked open like eggshells, some pristine, others melted into the stone as if swallowed halfway, faces in the windows, pressed against the glass, eyes wide, mouths moving in slow silence. People, still inside, trapped. Erin, She was in one of them, hands against the window, pale, eyes locked on mine. I stumbled forward, trying to reach her. But with every step I took, the corridor lengthened, the ground shifted beneath me, softening like wet sand, and the voice returned. But it wasn't Aaron anymore. It was many, a chorus. Male, female, childlike, whispers overlapping like wind in dead trees. You stepped in, you brought her words. You opened the door. Now stay. I screamed. The sound was swallowed before it left my lips. I ran. The corridor narrowed, turned, twisted. The stone began to pulse beneath my feet. A low groan echoed through the place, deep and mournful, like a whale calling through a dead ocean. Then I saw it, a mouth. Not metaphorical, a real mouth, massive, embedded in the stone, cracked lips, dry teeth, black tongue, breathing slow and steady, exhaling a dust that reeked of time and bone. It began to open wider. I turned and ran harder than I ever had in my life, the wind pulling at me like fingers, whispering promises I didn't understand. I found the depression again, the shimmer in the air, threw myself at it, and the world snapped. I woke up in Site 9. Inside the RV, it was morning. Birds were chirping, the sun was warm, kids were laughing near a picnic table. I stumbled out, dizzy. A family waved at me from 2 sites over. Morning, I stared. The campground was full, 12 rigs, people grilling, dogs barking, a couple arguing over tent poles. Normal, too normal. Frank was nowhere to be seen, neither was the depression. I walked around in a daze. My rig was clean, no fingerprints, no dust smears, but when I looked in the passenger seat, Aaron's journal was gone. In its place, a map, drawn by hand. Old parchment, faded lines, leading back, not to Whispering Mesa, but beneath it. And on the back of the map, written in tight, perfect cursive, it lets you leave when it wants to, but it never lets you forget. I didn't drive home right away. I sat there in the RV for hours, watching the campground like it was made of glass. Everything looked normal, but I didn't trust it. It felt too alive, too staged, like someone had overcorrected after I'd seen behind the curtain. I checked the map again. It showed canyons, trails, ridges, all real places in that region. But there was one landmark that didn't exist on any GPS, any topographic map, any satellite image I'd ever seen. A symbol shaped like an eye, marked simply with the word throat. No roads led to it, just a thin line of footpath etched through sandstone and scrubland. I stared at it so long I started to memorize it, like it was a brand, like it had always been there, deep in my memory, waiting. But I folded the map and put it in the drawer, and I left. I didn't tell anyone what happened. What could I say? Instead, I started driving east, back to Phoenix. But things didn't feel the same. The roads felt longer, rest stops emptier, the sky wider, the air quieter. And the worst part, I didn't hear knocking anymore. I missed it. Some nights I'd sit parked in a normal RV park, surrounded by families, laughter, smell of bacon grease and firewood, and I'd wish for the silence again. That deep, consuming quiet where nothing felt real except your own heartbeat. Because the noise of everyday life, it started to feel fake, manufactured. I began researching again, quietly, carefully, not online. I learned to ask the right questions. I met with park rangers who'd been around a while, old Navajo and Zuni men who didn't like talking, but would if you shut up long enough and listened with respect. I started hearing other stories. Stories of campers going missing in Four Corners, of RVs found abandoned in the desert, doors locked from the inside, reports of the hum, a low vibration people feel in their teeth just before everything goes wrong. One story stuck with me. A park ranger near Shiprock told me he once found a man sitting barefoot in the sand, rocking slowly, whispering a name over and over. The name wasn't his. They never found a matching ID. When the ranger asked what happened, the man just said, "I made it out, but I left part of myself behind." I knew what he meant, because something had shifted in me too. My sleep became lighter, my dreams darker. Sometimes I'd wake up and the rig would feel like it had moved, or something had been inside. Once I woke up to find every cabinet door open. I'd parked alone in a state park in Colorado. I thought maybe I'd been sleepwalking, until I noticed that the fridge was open too, and all the food inside gone, but no signs of a break-in. only a single smear across the inside of the refrigerator door. 6 lines, still dusted with red sand. So I started making rules. Not superstitions. Rules. I never camp in the same place twice. I never ignore the feeling when something feels wrong. I don't follow hand-drawn signs off the highway, and I never stay anywhere that's too quiet. But even with the rules, I can't stop what's coming, because I think I was marked. That place, whatever it is, knows me now, and it doesn't need coordinates or cell towers to find me. It lives under the skin of the land, inside the folds of time and distance. It waits behind the world we see. Sometimes when I'm deep in the desert, I'll hear it again. Just a flicker on the edge of silence. Knock, knock, knock. Or worse, nothing. Because the absence of the sound means it's already inside. I don't tell people this story when I pull into a campground. They wouldn't believe me. They'd smile politely and change the subject. That's fine. I don't need to convince anyone. But if you're out there, traveling the Southwest in your rig, chasing sunsets, sleeping under stars, listen to me. If you find a campground that feels too empty, if your GPS goes dark and the road keeps turning back, if you hear something tapping on the side of your RV at night, don't open the door. Don't look out the window. And if you find a place called Whispering Mesa, don't stop. Drive. As fast and as far as you can. Because once it sees you, you're never truly alone again. Story 5. There are places in this world that seem to breathe differently, where the trees lean too close. The wind doesn't just whistle, it speaks, and silence presses down on your chest like a warning. Olympic National Park in Washington, it's beautiful, vast, impossibly green. But beneath all that life, there's something else, something ancient and watching. I should have listened to my gut. It was July, warm and bright, and my wife Kara and I wanted one more summer RV trip before our oldest Dylan left for college. We'd done Zion, Yellowstone, even Big Bend. But the kids, Dylan, 17, and our daughter Mia, 13, wanted somewhere new, wild, untouched. Kara found a spot near Lake Crescent, tucked deep inside Olympic National Park. The pictures looked like a dream. Giant moss-draped trees, mirror-still waters, fern-covered trails. We packed up our 31-foot Winnebago and left Portland in high spirits. Just a family of 4 chasing a bit of peace in the woods. We weren't rookies. We'd done plenty of dry camping, knew how to check weather, cell coverage, even brought backup radios. But none of that prepares you for the moment a forest stops feeling like a sanctuary and starts feeling like a trap. It was a long, winding drive up toward the lake. The trees got taller, older looking. Some had trunks wider than our RV. As we climbed higher into the park, Kara leaned forward, peering through the windshield. "Do you feel that?" she asked. "Feel what?" "I don't know. It's just heavy, like the air." I gave her a look, then laughed it off. Probably just altitude. But she wasn't wrong. Something shifted in that forest. The deeper we drove, the quieter it got. No birds, no insects, just the occasional moan of wind through pine. Our reserved site was deep in the woods, Site 17, one of the most secluded in the whole campground. No hookups, no ranger within miles, just us and nature. At first, it was exactly what we wanted. That first evening, the fire crackled bright. We roasted hot dogs and told embarrassing stories. Mia fell asleep in her hammock, her little dog curled beside her. Dylan and I stayed up a bit later, sipping cocoa and looking at stars through the canopy. But just past midnight, something woke me. A sound, not loud, but deliberate, like sticks snapping in a slow rhythm. 2, then silence, 3 more, then nothing. I sat up in bed. Kara stirred beside me. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. She didn't even open her eyes. Probably a raccoon. I wanted to believe that. God, I wanted to. But it didn't sound random, like an animal foraging. It sounded spaced out, almost like footsteps. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside, barefoot on the cold pine needle floor. The fire had long gone out. Our campsite was pitch black except for the sliver of moonlight bleeding through the trees. I scanned the woods slowly. Nothing. But the quiet felt off, like the forest was holding its breath. The next morning, I didn't tell the kids. Kara knew something was bothering me, but I brushed it off, said I just didn't sleep well. She gave me that look, you know, the one that says, "Don't lie to me." But she let it go. We spent the day hiking around Merrimere Falls. Beautiful trail, everything was green and alive. The kids laughed, took photos, and even Kara relaxed. I started thinking maybe I had imagined it. Maybe the quiet was just nature doing its thing. Forests are weird like that. We got back to camp by late afternoon, tired but happy. Dylan strung up a tarp, Mia read by the fire, and Kara made chili on the portable stove. We were just settling in for the evening when she went to grab a spice container from the outdoor bin and stopped cold. "Matt," she said, her voice tight. "Did you take anything out of here earlier?" "No," I said, walking over. The bin had been pulled out from the side of the RV, like someone had tried to open it but gave up halfway. One of the latches was scratched. Deep claw marks gouged through the plastic, but there were no animal prints, no signs of disturbance around it. "I thought raccoon too," she said quietly, "but these are long, like fingers." That night I barely slept. I kept waking up to check windows, flick the porch light on, scan the trees. Nothing. Until 2:17 a.m., I'll never forget that exact time, because that's when it started again. This time, it was knocking. Nah, not on the RV, but from somewhere out in the trees. Slow, heavy, 3 knocks, then a pause, then 3 more. I sat up, heart pounding. Kara was already awake, staring at the ceiling. "You hear it?" she whispered. I nodded, holding my breath. It didn't sound like woodpeckers. It didn't sound like falling branches. It sounded intentional. I cracked the window and pointed the flashlight into the darkness. The beam hit nothing but dense green, trees so thick you couldn't see 5 feet past them. Then silence. No more knocking. No movement, not even wind. I closed the window and sat there for what felt like hours, eyes glued to the door. In the morning, I thought about packing up and leaving, but I didn't. I told myself I was overreacting, that we were safe, that we'd planned this trip for months, and I wasn't about to cut it short over some sounds in the woods. I had to believe that. I needed to believe that. The kids were still excited about hiking the Spruce Railroad Trail along Lake Crescent. It was a flat trail, mostly quiet, running parallel to the lake. After about a mile, there's an old tunnel, 190 feet long, dark, with moss-covered stone walls. It's cool in there, damp and echoey. The kids took turns scaring each other with silly ghost noises. But on the way back, we saw something that changed everything. A little side path branched off the main trail. It was narrow, overgrown, barely a game trail. But Mia saw something. She pointed it out first. "Look," she said, crouching. "Footprints. Bare feet. Human. Deep impressions in the soft dirt. Too large to be Mia's, too wide to be Dylan's." We stood in a tight circle, staring at them. They led off into the trees. "Someone must have gone swimming," Dylan said, trying to sound casual. "There's no beach here," Kara murmured. "We should have walked away, should have turned around and gone straight back to the RV. But curiosity is a powerful thing. So we followed them. Maybe 100 yards in, we found it. An old house, or what was left of one. It stood crooked among the trees, half swallowed by moss and vines. The roof was collapsed, but the walls still stood, gray and warped with age. Windows shattered, door hanging sideways on a broken hinge. It didn't look like a ranger structure. No signage, no markings, just abandoned. And yet there were signs of recent use. A bundle of twigs tied with red string, fresh-cut fir branches leaned against the door, symbols scratched into the wood, spirals and crosses, and something that looked like an eye. Mia whispered, "I don't like it here." Neither did I. The air was wrong, not just cold, still. Like even the wind avoided this place. We backed away slowly, and behind us, we heard the knocking again. 3 slow, hollow knocks. This time it came from the trees directly behind the abandoned house. None of us turned around right away. It's like our bodies were frozen in place, our ears straining to confirm that the sound was real. Even the kids didn't speak. No jokes, no nervous laughter. Another knock. Closer. I turned first, heart in my throat, and swept my flashlight across the forest behind us. Empty. Just the tangle of moss and cedar trunks. But that forest swallowed light. My beam barely reached 10 feet before it disappeared into black. "I think we should go," I said. Mia was already inching toward the trail. Dylan glanced at the symbols on the cabin wall again and shuddered. "I'm not sleeping here tonight," he muttered. We walked back fast. Not quite running, but fast enough that the silence between our footsteps felt unnaturally loud. I kept looking back, half expecting to see someone, or something, stepping out of that house behind us. But nothing followed. We didn't talk much on the trail. Each of us in our own heads, processing what we'd just seen. It wasn't until we were back at the RV, locked inside with the generator humming and lights on full, that anyone spoke again. "I don't think that house is supposed to be there," Kara said. "I've looked at all the park maps. I've never seen any structure marked anywhere near this campground. It's probably just some hunter's shack," I offered, though I didn't believe it. "Hunters don't draw that on their walls," Dylan said. I thought about calling the ranger station, but our phones still had no signal. Even the emergency frequency on our hand radio just hissed. By the time the fire died and we turned off the lights, the forest felt like it was breathing again, like something outside was waiting for us to fall asleep. I stayed awake as long as I could, sitting by the window with a camp hatchet in my lap, but eventually I dozed off. And that's when I saw it. Not in real life, at least I hope not, but in a dream so vivid I woke up gasping for breath. I was standing outside that same old house, staring through the doorway. Inside, it was dark, but not empty. Something was crouched in the far corner, its limbs too long, its head tilted toward me at an unnatural angle. I couldn't see its face, but I could hear it breathing, wet, slow, rasping. Then it crawled toward me. Not walked, crawled, its joints bending the wrong way, its fingers scraping the wood. No sound but breath and creaking. I tried to run, but I couldn't move. My feet were rooted to the ground. And just as it reached the doorway, the dream shattered. I bolted upright, sweating, heart thundering in my chest. For a moment I thought I was still dreaming, because I could still hear it breathing, but it wasn't in the dream. It was outside the RV. Kara sat up beside me at the exact same time. Her eyes were wide. "You hear that?" she whispered. We both heard it. Low, hoarse breathing, right outside the RV door. It moved, one slow, dragging step, then another. The gravel crunched beneath it. My pulse slammed in my ears. Then came the knock, just once. But this time it was against the RV door. I grabbed the hatchet, heart slamming against my ribs. I didn't turn on any lights. I didn't want it to see us clearly. I moved to the window, eased the curtain back just enough to look out. There was no one there. No prints, no shadow, no outline of anything human. But the breathing didn't stop. It moved toward the driver's side, toward Dylan's bunk above the cab. And that's when he screamed, "Dad!" I threw the door open and rushed outside, scanning the side of the RV. Nothing. I ran around the front, back toward his window. Still nothing. I heard Mia screaming now too, and Kara was yelling from inside. I burst back through the door and found Dylan shaking, white as a sheet. "I saw it," he said. It was right up against the glass." "What was?" I asked. He looked at me, dead serious. "It didn't have eyes. The rest of the night, we kept every light on. I don't think anyone slept, not even Mia's dog, who growled constantly at the door like it sensed something just beyond the frame." In the morning, we made a decision. We were leaving. No more hikes, no more exploring, no more trying to rationalize any of this. We packed everything up as quickly as we could. The woods were still quiet, but now the silence felt smug, like it knew we were scared, like it was waiting. Just before we pulled away, Dylan pointed out something scratched into the back of the RV. A symbol, one of the same ones from the house, etched deep into the paint near the rear window. A spiral nested inside a triangle. Mia burst into tears. Kara turned pale. I scraped at it with a rag and bleach, but it wouldn't come off. We drove out of that campground with every door locked and every window shut tight. But the fear didn't leave with us. Back on the highway, miles from the forest, we finally found a gas station with cell service. I looked up every map I could find. Not one of them mentioned a structure like the one we'd seen. I found old ranger documents, archival maps, even backcountry notes from hikers. Nothing. Then I found a thread on an old Pacific Northwest backpacking forum, a user talking about the cabin in the woods near Lake Crescent. The replies were chilling. Don't go looking for it. If it finds you once, it remembers you. That house wasn't built. It grew. Markings mean it's chosen you. Kara told me to stop reading. That was 3 weeks ago. We're home now. Safe. At least I hope we are. But some nights, especially when it's foggy, I still hear it, the knock. Slow, deliberate. And once, just before dawn, I found pine needles scattered across our porch. No trees for 30 feet in any direction. I burned the RV last week, told the insurance it was faulty wiring. But even now, when I close my eyes, I still see the doorway to that house. And I still hear it breathing. There's something no one tells you about fear. Not real fear. Not the kind you carry in your bones. It doesn't end when the threat is gone. It lingers. It rewires how you see the world. It makes shadows look longer, makes silence feel louder. And worst of all, it makes home stop feeling safe. After we burned the RV, things got quiet for a while. Kara went back to work. Dylan kept his plans to leave for college, even though I could see in his eyes he wasn't sleeping. Mia stopped drawing, which unsettled me more than anything. She used to sketch animals and trees, all bright with color. But after Olympic, she left her sketchbook untouched for weeks. When I finally convinced her to show me what she'd been working on, she pulled a wrinkled page from under her bed. I'll never forget it. A jagged outline of a house with slanted windows and a roof that bent like it was melting into the trees. No doors, just a hole. And inside it, eyes, dozens of them, swirling spirals where pupils should be. But Dylan said it didn't have eyes, I told her gently. Mia just stared at the floor. I don't think those are its eyes, she whispered. I think they're ours. I didn't know what to say. She folded the paper back up and didn't speak for the rest of the night. That's when I knew we hadn't left it behind. You think you can outrun a forest, a place that ancient? You can't. Because whatever we stumbled into out there, it doesn't stay in one place. It clings. A few days later, I started noticing things around the house. Subtle at first. Windows left open that I was sure I'd closed. Wet footprints by the back door. Just one or two like someone had stepped in from the yard and then vanished. Our security camera glitched constantly, showing static or flickers of movement we couldn't quite make out. At first, Kara blamed me. She thought I was obsessing, spiraling. She wasn't wrong. I was spiraling. But I also knew I could feel it, same as I felt it that night in the woods. That pressure, like the walls were breathing with me. Then came the knocking. 3 a.m, always 3 knocks, sometimes at the front door, sometimes at the back. Never frantic, just patient. I stopped opening them. I knew better. Dylan called me a week into his freshman year. Dad, he said, something's wrong with my roommate. I asked what happened. He keeps waking up screaming, Dylan whispered. Says he sees someone standing in the corner, but when he turns the light on, it's gone. I felt my skin go cold. Does he say anything else? Yeah, Dylan said. He said it keeps knocking. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room with every light on, just like I had in the RV, staring out the window, waiting. I started thinking maybe we needed help, real help. So I drove out to talk to someone, a retired forest ranger named Ellis, who used to work near Lake Crescent in the 90s. Found him through an old contact, agreed to meet him in a diner just outside Port Angeles. When I told him what happened, he didn't blink. He just stirred his coffee real slow, like he'd heard it all before. I know that trail, he said. Spruce Railroad, quiet place. But it wasn't always. He reached into his bag and pulled out a file folder, yellowed papers, grainy black and white photos of the forest. One of them made my stomach turn. It was the house. Not just a house. The house. Same angle we saw it from, same crooked doorway, even the strange markings on the wall. What is that? I asked, barely able to speak. Ellis exhaled through his nose. That's the old Morrigan cabin, or what's left of it. Built around 1912 by a man named Eli Morrigan. He and his wife moved out there, wanted to live off the land, but something went wrong. Records say his wife disappeared first, then a few hikers. By the time the rangers found him, he was walking naked in the woods, covered in blood, muttering about the spiral keeper. "The what?" I asked. He looked me dead in the eye. "Some say the forest out there isn't just old, it's alive, and it remembers every death it's ever held. They say certain places soak up what happens there, and sometimes if enough pain pools in one spot, it takes shape, and it starts choosing people." I laughed then, couldn't help it. "You think this is a ghost story?" He shook his head slowly. "No. Ghosts are people. This thing isn't. It's older than names. It waits in places that are already on the edge, places with quiet so deep you can hear your own soul shaking. That house, it's not really a house anymore. It's just a doorway now, and if it marks you." He didn't finish the sentence. Instead, he handed me a small paper bundle. Inside was a thick chunk of cedar bark tied with braided twine and a pouch of black salt. "Put that above your door. Burn the bark once the knocking starts. And don't ever answer it, no matter what you hear, not even if it sounds like your kids." I left the diner with my heart racing, not sure whether I felt relieved or more terrified, but I followed his instructions. That night, when the knocking came again, I did exactly what Ellis said. 3 knocks, then silence, then a voice. "Daddy?" It was Mia's voice, high and scared. "I'm cold. I'm outside." I gripped the couch arm so hard my knuckles went white. The voice came again. "Please open the door. There's something in the woods. It's chasing me." But Mia was asleep in her bed upstairs. I could hear her soft breathing through the baby monitor we kept on, even now. Then the voice changed, like it was unraveling, like someone trying to remember how to sound human. "I'm Mia, Daddy, let us home." I lit the cedar bark in a metal bowl like Ellis told me. The moment it caught flame, the voice shrieked, high and distorted like metal bending. Then silence. Not just outside, but everywhere. Even the crickets stopped, even the hum of the fridge. I didn't sleep, but I didn't hear the knock again. For a few nights, things went quiet. Hope started creeping back in. Then Mia started sleepwalking. We found her at the front door one night, hand on the lock, eyes closed, whispering, "He's waiting." We had to bolt the door shut after that, hid every key. I sat by her bed for hours each night, just watching her breathe. And even now, I can feel it pressing at the edges of our life, like a fog that slips in through the smallest cracks. Dylan's roommate dropped out of school, said he couldn't stay in that dorm another night, said it was sleeping on his ceiling. I never told Dylan that part. I never told anyone most of what I've just told you, because when you say something out loud, you make it real. You give it form. And I don't know if that's what it wants, but I know this much. That house is still out there, and it's waiting. 1 week after Mia started sleepwalking, I got a call from a blocked number. I don't usually answer those, but something in my gut told me to pick up. A man's voice came through, raspy, like he'd smoked for 40 years and swallowed gravel. "You brought it out." I froze. "Who is this?" "You should have left it alone," he said. "Now it knows your name." The line went dead. I called the number back. No answer. I ran it through every lookup tool I could find. Nothing. That night I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table, my shotgun across my lap, lights off, watching, waiting, trying to remember exactly what I had done wrong. Was it walking into that house, hearing the knock and listening, or just not trusting my instincts the first night I heard the branches snap? I think now that it doesn't need you to do anything, just to see it, just to notice, and then it starts to follow. Around 2:30 a.m., the motion detector on our front porch clicked on. The soft floodlight buzzed to life. Something was standing at the edge of the yard. I couldn't make out its face, but the shape, it was too tall. Its limbs hung lower than they should have. Its head tilted like it wasn't attached right. It didn't move, just stood there, watching. I didn't go outside. I didn't even breathe loud. I just stared through the curtain. My hands clenched so tight on the shotgun I could feel the blood drain from my fingers. After a few minutes, the light shut off. It was gone. But the next morning, I found a dead crow nailed to our front porch with a rusted railroad spike. No blood, just nailed there, wings spread wide. I buried it behind the garage and didn't say a word to the kids. Kara knew, though. She could see it in my eyes. She pulled me aside in the garage later that night and whispered, "We have to do something. We can't keep living like this." I know. "There's one more place I can ask," she said. "There's this woman, used to be a park interpreter. I've read her blog before. She's into folklore and trail lore and all that stuff. Real grounded, not mystical." The next day, Kara got in touch with her. Her name was June, and she lived in a small cabin near Forks, Washington. She agreed to meet us, said she'd heard of the Spiral Keeper, but only in fragments. Whispered legends passed down from logging families and the Quileute tribe, mixed with settler superstitions. We drove up the following weekend, left the kids with Kara's sister. The road into Forks was gray, misted, beautiful in that melancholy way only the Olympic Peninsula can be. And still, something in the fog followed us. Even the trees seemed to bend closer to the road as we drove past. June's cabin was surrounded by salt lines, pine needles, and small braided ropes hanging from every window and door. When she opened the door, she didn't ask who we were. She just said, "You went to the house, didn't you?" I nodded. She sat us down, poured us strong black coffee, and told us everything she knew. "There are places in this country that predate memory," she began. "Not just in time, but in awareness. Olympic is one of them. It's protected, yes, but not just by the government. The land itself has boundaries." "And we crossed one?" I asked. She nodded. "There are stories," she continued, "of an entity that doesn't kill outright. It marks, it watches, it chooses families. The knocking, that's the beginning. It's asking to be let in, not through doors, through your awareness. Once it has that, it never really leaves." "What do we do?" Kara asked. "Is there a way to break it?" June sighed. "Not break, but delay. We can perform a severance. Symbolic, spiritual. It won't destroy it, but it might keep it at a distance, long enough to give you peace." We stayed the night. June prepared a ceremony. Nothing flashy or theatrical, just quiet. We stood in a ring of cedar smoke, holding objects from the forest we brought back, a pine cone, a strip of moss from Mia's hiking boots, the photo Dylan had taken on his phone of the house before he deleted it in fear. June chanted something low, rhythmical. Then she burned the items one by one. When it was done, she handed me a jar. "Charcoal ash mixed with grave dirt," she said. "Scatter it in a full circle around your home. Do it at sunrise. Then forget the house. Forget the knock. Speak of it no more." We drove back home feeling hollow, but the air felt a little lighter. We did everything she told us, scattered the ash, burned the last of the souvenirs, tore up Mia's drawings, even the spiral she'd carved into her headboard in her sleep, and for a while, weeks even, it was quiet. No knocks, no dreams, no shadows in the yard. Dylan called to say he was finally sleeping again. Mia started drawing birds and clouds. Kara smiled more, and I let myself believe it was over. Until last night. I woke up at 3 a.m., not because of a knock, but because I couldn't breathe. Not like something was choking me. No, like something was inside my lungs. Heavy, ancient, like my breath wasn't mine anymore. I stumbled into the bathroom and turned on the light. That's when I saw it. On the mirror, drawn in condensation that hadn't been there a moment before, was a spiral, and beneath it, doorway. This time, I didn't scream. I didn't call for Kara. I wiped it clean and sat on the edge of the tub for what felt like hours, because I finally understood it doesn't need to knock anymore. It's already inside.